Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 7, Chapter 7. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadata Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. What Prahlad learned in the womb. In this chapter, to dissipate the doubts of his class friends, the sons of the demons, Prahlad Maharaj states how, within the womb of his mother, he had heard from the mouth of Narada Muni, who had instructed him in Bhagavatam. When Hiranyakashipu left his kingdom and went to the mountain known as Mandrachala to execute severe austerities, all the demons scattered. Hiranyakashipu's wife, Kayadi, was pregnant at that time, and the demigods, mistakenly thinking that she carried another demon in her womb, arrested her. Their plan was that as soon as the child took birth, they would kill him. While they were talking, while they were taking Kayadu to the heavenly planets, they met Narada Muni, who stopped them from taking her away and took her to his ashram until Hiranyakashipu's return. In Narada Muni's ashram, Kayadu prayed for the protection of the baby in her womb, and Narada Muni reassured her and gave her instructions on spiritual knowledge. Taking advantage of those instructions, Prahlad Maharaj, although a small baby within the womb, listened very carefully. The spirit soul is always part of the material body. There is no change in the spiritual form of the living entity. Any person above the bodily conception of life is pure and can revive transcendental knowledge. This transcendental knowledge is devotional service. And Prahlad Maharaj, while living in the womb of his mother, received instructions in devotional service from Narad Muni. Any person engaged in the service of the Lord through the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master is immediately liberated. And being free from the clutches of Maya, he is relieved of all ignorance and material desires. The duty of everyone is to take shelter of the Supreme Lord and thus become free from all material desires. Regardless of the material condition in which one is situated, one can achieve this perfection. Devotional service is not dependent on the material activities of austerity, penance, mystic yoga, or piety. Even without such assets, one can achieve devotional service through the mercy of a pure devotee. Text 1. Translation. Narad Muni said, although Prahlad Maharaj was born in a family of Asuras, he was the greatest of all devotees. Having thus been questioned by his class friends, the sons of the Asuras, he remembered the words spoken to him by me and replied to his friends as follows. Purport. When he was in the womb of his mother, Prahlad Maharaj listened to the words of Narada Muni. No one can imagine how the baby in womb could hear Narada, but that is spiritual life. Progress in spiritual life cannot be abstracted by any material condition. This is called ahaituki aprahatiyata. Reception of spiritual knowledge is never checked by any material condition. Thus, Prahlad Maharaj, from his very childhood, spoke spiritual knowledge to his class friends, and certainly it was effective, although all of them were children. Text 2. Translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, When our fathers, Hiranyakashipu, went to Mandrachala mountain to execute severe austerities, in his absence, the demigods headed by King Indra made a severe attempt to subdue all the demons in warfare. X3. Alas, as a serpent is eaten by small ants, so the troublesome Hiranyakashipu, who always inflicted miseries upon all types of people, has now been defeated by the reactions of his own sinful activities. Seeing this, the demigods headed by King Indra arranged to fight the demons. When the great leader of the demons, who had been killed, who were being killed one after another, saw the unprecedented exertion of the demigods in fighting, they began to flee, scattering themselves in all directions simply to protect their lives. They hastily fled from their homes, wives, children, and animals, and household paraphernalia. Paying no heed to all these, the demons simply fled. Text 6. The victorious demigods plundered the palace of Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons, and destroyed everything within it. Then Indra, the king of heaven, arrested my mother, the queen. 7. As she was being led away, crying in fear like a Purari captured by a vulture, the great sage Narada, who at that time had no engagement, appeared on the scene and saw her in that condition. Narad Muni said, O Indra, king of the demigods, this woman is certainly sinless. You should not drag her off in this merciless way. O fortunate one, this chaste woman is the wife of another. You must immediately release her. Text 9. King Indra said, in the womb of this woman, the wife of the demon Hiranyakashipu is the seed of that great demon. Therefore, let her remain in our custody until her child is delivered. Then we shall release her. Purport. Indra, the king of heaven, decided to arrest Prahlad Maharaj's mother because he thought that another demon, another Hiranyakashipu, was within her womb. The best course, he thought, was to kill the child when the child was born, and then the woman could be released. Text 10. Narad Muni replied, the child within this woman's womb is faultless and sinless. Indeed, he is a great devotee, a powerful servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you will not be able to kill him. Purport. There have been many instances in which demons or non devotees have attempted to kill a devotee, but they have never been able to destroy a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord promises in Bhagavad Gita 9:31. Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. This is a declaration of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that his devotee cannot be killed by demons. Prahlad Maharaj is the vivid example of the truth of this promise. Narad Muni told the king of heaven, it would be impossible for you to kill the child, even though you are a demigod, and certainly it would be impossible for others. Text 11. When the great saint Narad Muni had thus spoken, King Indra, being respectful to Narada's words, immediately released my mother. Because of being a devotee of the Lord, all the demigods, because of my being a devotee of the Lord, all the demigods circumambulated her. Then they returned to their celestial kingdom. Purport. Although King Indra and the other demigods are exalted personalities, they were so obedient to Narad Muni that King Indra immediately accepted Narad Muni's words concerning Prahlad Maharaj. This is called understanding by the Parampara system. Indra, the king of demigods did not know that a great devotee was in the womb of Kayadu, the wife of Hiranyakashipu. But they accepted the authoritative statements of Narada Muni and immediately offered their respects to the devotee by circumambulating the woman in whose womb he was living. To understand God and the devotee by the parampara system is the process of knowledge. There is no need to speculate about God and his devotee. One should accept the statements of a bona fide devotee and thus try to understand. Text 12. Prahlad Maharaj continued. The great saint Narad Muni brought my mother to his ashram and assured her of all protection, saying, My dear child, please remain at my ashram until the arrival of your husband. After accepting the instructions of Devarishi Narada, my mother stayed in his care without the fears from any direction, as long as my father, the king of the Daityas, had not been freed from his severe austerities. My mother, being pregnant, desired the safety of her embryo and desired to give birth after her husband's arrival. Thus she stayed at Narad Muni's ashram, where she rendered service to Narad Muni with great devotion. Purport. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 9:19-17. Matra sarvatra dukhitrava naivi vikshano bhavet balavan indriya gramo vidyam vidvamsam api karshati. One should not remain in a secluded place with a woman, even one's mother, sister, or daughter. Nonetheless, although one is strictly prohibited from staying with a woman in a secluded place, Narad Muni gave shelter to Prahlad Maharaj's young mother, who rendered service to him with great devotion and faith. Does this mean that Narad Muni transgressed the Vedic injunctions? Certainly he did not. Such injunctions are intended for mundane creatures, but Narad Muni is transcendental to mundane categories. Narad Muni is a great saint and is transcendently situated. Therefore, although he was a young man, he could give shelter to a young woman and accept a service. Haridas Thakur also spoke to a young woman, a prostitute, in the dead of night. But the woman could not deviate his mind. Instead, she became a Vaishnavi, a pure devotee, by the benediction of Haridas. Ordinary persons, however, should not imitate such highly elevated devotees. No one should imitate Narad Muni or Haridas Thakur. It is said, Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra Vigna na Bhujaya. Even if a person is very advanced in learning, he cannot understand the behavior of a Vaishnava. Anyone can take shelter of a pure Vaishnava without fear. Therefore, in the previous verse, it has been distinctly said, Devarish, Devarisher Antike Sakkuto Avya. Hayadi, the mother of Prahlad Maharaj, stayed under the protection of Narad Muni without fear from any direction. Similarly, Narad Muni, in his transcendental position, stayed with the young woman without the fear of deviation. Narad Muni, Haridas Thakur, and similar acharyas, especially empowered to broadcast the glories of the Lord, cannot be brought down to the material platform. Therefore, one is strictly forbidden to think that the acharya is an ordinary human being. Gurushur Nara Mati. Text 15. Narad Muni delivered his instruction both to me, who was within the womb, and to my mother, who was engaged in rendering him service. Because he is naturally extremely kind to the fallen souls. Being in a transcendental position, he gave instructions on religion and transcendental knowledge. These instructions were free from all material contamination. Purport. Here it is said, Dharmasya Tattvam Jnanaja Nirmalam. The word Nirmalam refers to spotless dharma, spotless religion, or in other words, Bhagavad Dharma. Ordinary ritualistic activities constitute contaminated religion, by which one benefits by developing material wealth and prosperity. But uncontaminated, pure religion consists of understanding one's relationship with God and acting accordingly, thus fulfilling the highest mission of life and returning home back to God. Prahlad Maharaj advised that one should elevate oneself to the standard of Bhagavad Dharma from the very beginning of life. Kaumare Achara Pragyo Dharman Bhagavatan Iha. The Lord Himself also speaks of pure uncontaminated religion when He says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Raj. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Bhagavad Gita 1866. One must understand one's relationship with God and then act accordingly. This is Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma means Bhakti Yoga. Vasudeve Bhagavati. Bhakti Yoga Prayochitaha. Janayati Ashvairavyam. Jnanam Chayat Ahaitukam. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.7. To be situated on the platform of pure religion, one should perform Bhakti Yoga in relationship with Krishna, Vasudeva. Text 16. Because of the long duration of time that has passed, and because of her being a woman and therefore less intelligent, my mother has forgotten all those instructions. But the great sage Narada blessed me, and therefore I could not forget them. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9.32, the Lord says, Mam hi partha vipashritya yebhishu papayonaya striya vaishya tata shudras tepe yanti param gati. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter of me, though they may be low-born, women, Vaishyas, or Shudras, can approach the supreme destination. The word Papayoni refers to those who are less than Shudras. But even though a woman may not be a Papayoni, because of being less intelligent, she sometimes forgets devotional instructions. For those who are strong enough, however, there is no question of forgetting. Women are generally attached to material enjoyment, and because of this tendency, they sometimes forget devotional instructions. But if even a woman practices devotional service strictly, according to rules and regulations, the statement of the Lord Himself that she can return to Godhead, Te apiyanti param gatim, is not at all astonishing. One must take shelter of the Lord and rigidly follow the rules and regulations. Then, regardless of what one is, one will return home back to Godhead. Prahlada Maharaj's mother was more concerned with protecting the child in the womb and was very anxious to see her husband return. Therefore, she could not consider very seriously the sublime instructions of Narad Muni. Text 17. Prahlad Maharaj continued, My dear friends, if you can place faith in my words, simply by that faith, you can understand transcendental knowledge. Just like me, although you are small children. Similarly, a woman can also understand transcendental knowledge and know what is spirit and what is matter. Purport. These words of Prahlad Maharaj are very important in regard to knowledge, descending by the disciplic succession. Even when Prahlad Maharaj was a baby within the womb of his mother, he became fully convinced of the existence of the supreme power because of hearing the powerful instructions of Narada. and understood how to attain perfection in life by Bhakti Yoga. These are the top most important instructions in spiritual knowledge. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tasyaita kaditha hi arthan prakashanti mahatmanah. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. Svetashvara Upanishad. अतः श्री कृष्ण नामादि न भवेत् ग्राह्यमिन्द्रियं सेवन्मुखे हि जिह्वादौ स्वयं एव स्फुरत्यदः. No one can understand Krishna as he is by blunt material senses, but he reveals himself to the devotees, being pleased with them for their love, transcendental loving service unto him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.234. Bhaktya me mam abhijanati yavan yasyati tatvatah tato mam tatvato gyatva vishayetat anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. When one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Bhagavad Gita 18.55. These are Vedic instructions. One must have full faith in the words of the spiritual masters and similar faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the real knowledge of Atma and Paramatma and the distinction between matter and spirit will be automatically revealed. This Atma Tattva or spiritual knowledge will be revealed within the core of a devotee's heart because of his having taken shelter of the lotus feet of a Mahajan, such as Prahlad Maharaj. In this verse, the word Bhuyar may be understood to mean, let there be. Prahlad Maharaj offers his blessings to his close friends, saying, also become faithful like me, become a bona fide Vaishnava. A devotee of the Lord desires for everyone to take to Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, however, people sometimes do not have staunch faith in the words of the spiritual masters who comes by the disciplic succession, and therefore they're unable to understand transcendental knowledge. The spiritual masters must be in the line of authorized disciplic succession, like Prahlad Maharaj, who received the knowledge from Narada. If the class friends of Prahlad Maharaj, the sons of demons, were to accept the truth through Prahlad, they would certainly also become fully aware of the of transcendental knowledge. The words Vish Vaisharada Dhya Dhi refers to intelligence concerning the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is extremely expert. The Lord has created wonderful universes by his expert knowledge. Unless one is extremely expert, he cannot understand the expert management of the Supreme Expert. One can understand, however, if one is fortunate enough to meet a bona fide spiritual master coming in the disciplic succession from Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Mother Lakshmi, or the Kumaras. These four sampradayas or disciplic succession and Kumara Sampradaya the four sampradayas or disciplic succession of knowledge and transcendence are called Brahma Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya, Sri Sampradaya, and Kumara Sampradaya. Sampradaya Vihina Ye Mantraste Nishpala Mati. The knowledge of the Supreme received from such a sampradaya or disciplic succession can give one enlightenment. If one does not take to the path of disciplic succession, it is not possible for me to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one understands the Supreme Lord through devotional service with faith in the disciplic succession, then one advances further. He awakens his natural love of God, and then his success in life is assured. 18. Just as fruits and flowers of a tree in due course undergo six changes, birth, existence, growth, and transformation, dwindling, and then death. The material body, which is obtained by spirit soul under different circumstances. However, there is no set change for the spiritual world, spirit soul, purport. This is a very important verse in understanding the difference between the supreme soul and material body. The soul is eternal, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.20. न जायते म्रियत्यो वा कदाचन नायं भूत्वा भविता वानो भूयः अजो नित्य शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been, does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, underlying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. The spirit soul is eternal, being freed from waste and change, which takes place because of the material body. The example of a tree and its fruits and flowers are very simple and clear. A tree stands for many, many years, but with the exchange of seasonal fruits and flowers, undergoes six transformations. The foolish theory of modern chemists that life can be produced by chemical interactions cannot be accepted as true. The birth of a human being's material body takes place due to mixture of the ovum and semen. But the history of birth is that although the ovum and semen mix together after sex, there is not always pregnancy unless the soul enters the mixture, there is no possibility of pregnancy. But when the soul takes shelter of the mixture of body, takes birth, exists, grows, transforms, and dwindles. And ultimately, it is vanquished. The fruits and flowers of a tree seasonally come and go, but the tree continues to stand. Similarly, this transmigration soul accepts various bodies which undergo six transformations. But the soul remains permanently the same. Ajo nityam shashvatoyam. Purana na hanyamane sharire. The soul is eternal and everlasting, but the bodies are accepted by the soul and changing. There are two kinds of souls: the supreme soul, the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul, the living entity. As various bodies take different place in the individual soul, different millennium of creation take place in the supreme soul. In this regard, Madhvacharya says, Shatvikara sharirasya na Vishnu tad jnana jatasya cha tad abhinam shariram cha yatva tan mayatan tyajet. Since the body is the eternal feature of the soul is not dependent on the body. Rather, the body is dependent on the soul. One who understands this truth should not be very much anxious about the maintenance of his body. There is no possibility of maintaining the body permanently or eternally. Antavante ime deha nitya shokta sharirinaha. That is the statement of Bhagavad Gita 2:18. The material body is antavad, perishable. Thus, the soul within the body is eternal. Nitya Shokta Sharirinaha. Lord Vishnu and the individual souls who are part and parcel of who are parts of the of Lord Vishnu. All the various gardens of bodies, from the gigantic universal body to the small body of an ant, are perishable. But the super soul and the soul, being equal in quantity, can both exist eternally. This is further explained in the next verses. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord or the living entity. Both of them are spiritual, free from birth and death, free from deterioration, and free from material contamination. They are individual and they are known of the external body. They are individual and they are the knowers of the external body. And they are the foundation or shelter of everything. They are free from material change. They are self illuminated. They are the cause of all causes and they are all pervading. Continue. Texts 19 and 20. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord or the living entities. Both of them are spiritual, free from birth and death, free from deterioration, and free from material contamination. They're individual and they're the knowers of the external body, and they're the foundation or shelter of everything. They're free from material change. They're self illuminated. They're the cause of all causes. And they're all pervading. They have nothing to do with the material body. Therefore, they're always covered. With these transcendental qualities, one who's actually learned must give up the illusory conception of life in which he thinks. And this material body and everything in relation with this body is mine. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna clearly says, Mamai Vamsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta. All the living entities are part of me. Therefore, the living entities are qualitatively the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the leader, the Supreme among all living entities. In the Vedas, it is said, Nitya Nityanam, Chetanas Chetananam. The Lord is the chief individual living entity, the leader of the subordinate living entities. Because the living entities are part or samples of God, their qualities are not different from those of the Supreme Lord. The living entities have the same qualities as the Lord, just as a drop of seawater is composed of the same chemicals as the great sea itself. Thus, there is oneness in quality, but a difference in quantity. One cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by understanding the sample, the living entity, because all the qualities of God exist in a very minute quantity in the living entities. There is oneness, but God is great, whereas the living entities are extremely small. Aniyor, Aniyan, Mahato, Mahiyan. Katha Upanishad 1.2.20. The living entities are smaller than the atom, but God is greater than the greatest. Our conception of greatness may be represented by the sky because we think of sky as being unlimitedly big, but God is bigger than the sky. Similarly, we have knowledge of the living entities, that the living entities are smaller than atoms, being 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. Yet the quality of being the supreme cause of all causes exists in the living entity as well as in the supreme personality of Godhead. Indeed, it is due to the presence of the living entity that the body exists and the bodily changes take place. Similarly, it is because of the Supreme Lord is within the universe that changes dictated by the material laws occur. The word Eka means individual is significant. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, Madsthana Sarva Bhutani Cha Chaham Tvesh Avasthitaha. Everything material and spiritual, including earth, water, air, fire, sky, and the living entities, exist on the platform of spirit soul. Although everything is an emanation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one should not think that the Supreme Lord is dependent upon anything else. Both God and the living entity are fully conscious. As living entities, we are conscious of our bodily existence. Similarly, the Lord is conscious of the gigantic cosmic manifestation. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Yasmin Duvya Prithvi Chatiriksham Vignataram Adhikena Vignaniyat Ekam Ivadvityam Atmajoti Samrat Ihovacha Sa Iman Lokan Ashrijata Satyam Jnanam Anantam Asangohi Ayam Purusha Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyati. All these Vedic injunctions prove that both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the minute soul are individual. One is great and the other is small, but both of them are the cause of all causes. The corporally limited, and the universally unlimited. We should always remember that although we are equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in quality, we are never equal to Him in quantity. Persons with a small fund of intelligence, finding themselves equal in quality with God, foolishly think that they are equal in quantity also. Their intelligence is called Avishuddha Buddhaya, unpolished or contaminated intelligence. When such a person, after endeavoring hard for many, many lives to understand the supreme cause, are finally in actual knowledge of Krishna, Vasudeva, they surrender unto him. Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Thus they become great Mahatmas, perfect souls. If one is fortunate enough to understand his relationship with God, knowing that God is great, Vibhu, whereas the living entity is small, Anu, he is perfect in knowledge. The individual exists in darkness when he thinks that he is the material body and that everything in relation with the material body belongs to him. This is called Aham Mama Janasya Mohoyam Aham Mameti. That is illusion. One must give up his illusory conception and thus become fully aware of everything. 21. An expert geologist can understand where there is gold and by various processes can extract it from the gold ore. Similarly, a spiritually advanced person can understand how the spiritual particle exists within the body, and thus, by cultivating spiritual knowledge, he can attain perfection in spiritual life. However, as one who is not expert cannot understand where there is gold, a foolish person who has not cultivated spiritual knowledge cannot understand how the spirit exists within the body. Purport. Here is a very good example concerning spiritual understanding. Foolish rascals, including so-called jnanis, philosophers, and scientists, cannot understand the existence of the soul within the body because they're lacking in spiritual knowledge. The Vedas enjoin that vijnanartham sa guru eva vigachat. To understand spiritual knowledge, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. Unless one has been trained in geology, one cannot detect gold and stone. Similarly, unless one has been trained by a spiritual master, he cannot understand what is spirit and what is matter. Here it is said, Yogesh tat abhigyana. This indicates that one who has connected himself with spiritual knowledge can understand that there is a spiritual soul within the body. However, one who is not who is in an animalistic conception of life and who has no spiritual culture cannot understand. As an expert mineralogist or geologist can understand where there is gold and can then invest his money to dig there and chemically separate the gold from the ore. An expert spiritualist can understand the soul is within matter. One who has not been trained cannot distinguish between gold and stone. Similarly, fools and rascals who have not learned from an expert spiritual master who is soul and what is soul and what is matter cannot understand the existence of the soul within the body. To understand such knowledge, one must be trained in mystic yoga system or finally in bhakti yoga system. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 1855, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati. Unless one takes shelter of Bhakti Yoga, one cannot understand the existence of the soul within the body. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita begins by teaching Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara तथा देहांतर प्राप्ति धीरस्तत्र न. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. Thus, the first instruction is that one should understand that the soul is within the body and is transmigrating from one body to another. This is the beginning of spiritual knowledge. Any person who is not expert in understanding this science or is unwilling to understand it remains in the bodily conception of life or the animalistic conception of life, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyatma buddhi kunabed tridhatuke sa eva gokhara. Every member of human society should clearly understand the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, for only in this way one can be spiritually elevated and automatically give up the false illusory knowledge by which one thinks, I am this body, and everything belongs to this body is mine. Aham mama iti. This doggish conception should be rejected immediately. One should be prepared to understand the spirit soul and the supreme spirit God, who is eternally related. Thus, one may return home back to Godhead having solved all the problems of life. Text 22. The Lord's eight separated material energies, the three modes of material nature, and the 16 transformations, the 11 senses, and the five gross material elements like earth and water. Within all these, the one spiritual soul exists as the observer. Therefore, all the great acharyas have concluded that the spirit soul is conditioned by these material elements. Purport. As explained in the previous verse, क्षेत्रेषु देहेषु तथात्म योगैर् अध्यात्मविद् ब्रह्मगतिं लभेत. A spiritually advanced person who can understand how the spiritual particle exists within the body, and thus by cultivating spiritual knowledge can attain perfection in spiritual life. The intelligent person who is expert in finding the soul, the self within the body, must understand the eight external energies that are listed in Bhagavad Gita. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kham mano buddhir evacha ahankara iti yamhe bhinna prakritir ashrada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these eight comprise my separated material energies. Bhumi, earth, includes all the objects of materials of sense perception. Rupa, form, rasa, taste, gandha, smell, shabda, sound, and sparsha, touch. Within the earth are the fragrance of roses, the taste of sweet fruit, and whatever else we want. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Sarva Kama Dugha Mahi. The earth, Mahi, contains all our requirements. Thus, the objects of sense perception are all present in me or earth. The gross material elements and subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and ahankara, false ego, constitute the total material energy. Within the total material energy are three material modes or qualities. These qualities, sattva guna, rajo guna, and tamo guna, belong not to the soul but to the material energy. It is because of the interactions of these three material modes of nature that the five knowledge gathering senses, the five working senses, and their controllers, the mind, are manifested. Then, according to these modes, the living entity gets the opportunity to perform different types of karma with different types of knowledge, thinking, feeling, and willing. Thus, the body machine begins to work. This has also been properly analyzed in the Sankhya Yoga by the great acharyas, especially by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In his incarnation as Devavati Putra Kapila. This is indicated here by the word Acharya. We do not follow anyone who is not an authorized Acharya. Acharyavan Purusha Veda. One can understand the truth fully when he has taken shelter of an expert Acharya. The living entity is individual, but the body is a composition of many material elements. This is proved by the fact that as soon as the living entity quits this combination of material elements, he becomes a mere conglomeration of matter. The matter is qualitatively one, and the spirit soul is qualitatively one with the Supreme. The Supreme is one, and the individual soul is one. But the individual soul is understood to be a matter of the individual combinations of material energy, whereas the Supreme Soul is the controller of the total material energy. The living entity is the master of his particular body, and according to his activities, he is subjected to different types of pains and pleasures. However, although the Supreme Person, the Paramatma, is also one, he is present as an individual in all the different bodies. The material energy is in fact divided into 24 elements. The individual soul, the owner of the individual body, is the 25th subject, and everything and above everything is Lord Vishnu as Paramatma, the supreme controller. who is the 26th subject. When one understands all these 26 subjects, he becomes Adhyatmavid, an expert in understanding the distinction between matter and spirit. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 13.3, Kshetra Kshetra Gyor Jnanam, understanding of the Kshetra, the constitution of the body, and of the individual soul, and the super soul constitutes real jnana or knowledge. Unless one ultimately understands the Supreme Lord is eternally related with the individual soul, one's knowledge is imperfect. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan ma prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Everything material and spiritual constitutes of various energies of Vasudeva, to whom the individual soul, the spiritual part of the Supreme Lord, is subordinate. Upon understanding this perfect knowledge, one surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Text 23. There are two types of bodies for every individual soul. The gross body made of the five gross elements and the subtle body made of three subtle elements. Within these bodies, however, is the spirit soul. One must find the soul by analysis, saying, this is not it, this is not it. Thus, one must separate spirit from matter. Purport. As previously stated, Swarnam Yatha Graveshu Hemakarai Kshetreshu Yogestat Abhigya Anup Apnuyet. An expert in the study of soil can find out where gold is and then dig there. He can analyze the stone and test the gold with nitric acid. Similarly, one must analyze the whole body to find within the body the spirit soul. In studying one's own body, one must ask himself whether his head is his soul, his fingers are his soul, his hand is his soul, and so on. In this way, one must gradually reject all material elements and combinations of material elements in the body. Then, if one is expert and follows the Acharya, he can understand he is the spirit soul living within the body. The greatest Acharya, Krishna, begins his teachings in Bhagavad Gita by saying, Dehe yasmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam chara tatha dehantara prapti dhiras tatra namujyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. The spirit soul possesses the body and is within the body. This is the real analysis. The soul never mixes with the bodily elements. Although the soul is within the body, it is separate and always pure. One must analyze and understand his self. This is self realization. Niti Niti is the analytical process of rejecting matter. By expertly conducting such an analysis, one can understand where the soul is. One who is not expert, however, cannot distinguish gold from earth, nor the soul from the body. Text 24. Sober and expert persons who search for the spirit soul with, with, with minds purified through analytical study in terms of the soul's connection with and distinction from all things that undergo creation, maintenance, and destruction. Purport. A sober person can study himself and distinguish the soul from the body by analytical study. For example, when one considers his body, his head, his hands, and so on, one can certainly understand the difference between the spirit soul and the body. No one can say, I head. Everyone says, my head. Thus, there are two entities, the head and the I. They're not identical, although they appear to be one conglomeration. One may argue When we analyze the body, we find a head, hands, legs, a belly, blood, bones, urine, stool, and so on. But after everything is considered, where is the existence of the soul? A sober man, however, avails himself of this Vedic injunction. Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jadena jivanti, yat prayanti abhisam vishanti, tat vijnana shasva, tat brahmeti. Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1. Thus, he can understand that the head, hands, legs, and indeed the entire body have grown on the basis of the soul. If the soul is within the body, head, hands, and legs grow. But otherwise, they do not. A dead child cannot grow up, for the soul is not present. If by a careful analysis of the body one cannot find the existence of the soul, this is due to his ignorance. How can a gross man, fully engaged in materialistic activities, understand the soul, which is a small particle of spirit, 1/10,000 the size of the tip of a hair? Such a person foolishly thinks that the material body has grown from a combination of chemicals, although he cannot find them. The Vedas inform us, however, that the chemical combinations do not constitute the living force. The living force is the Atma and Paramatma, and the body grows on the basis of that living force. The fruit of a tree grows and undergoes six kinds of change because of the presence of the tree. If there were no tree, there would be no question of the growth and maturity of fruit. Therefore, beyond the existence of the body are the Paramatma and Atma within the body. This is the first understanding of spiritual knowledge explained in Bhagavad Gita. Tehino asmin yatha dehi. The body exists because of the presence of the Supreme Lord and the Jiva, which is part of the Lord. This is further explained by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:4. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyaktamurtina matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham tesham avasthitam. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. The Supreme Soul exists everywhere. The Vedas enjoin Sarva Kala Idam Brahman. Everything is Brahman or an expansion of Brahman's energies. Sutra Mani Gana Eva. Everything rests on the Lord, just as pearls strung together on a thread. The thread is the principal Brahman. He is the supreme cause, the supreme Lord upon whom everything rests. Mata Parataram Nanyat. Thus, we must study the Atma and Paramatma, the individual soul and the super soul, upon whom the entire material cosmic manifestation rests. This is explained by the Vedic statement Yato va imani bhutani jayanti yena jatani jivanti. Text 25. Intelligence can be perceived in three states of activity: wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. A person who perceives these three is to be considered the original master, the ruler, the supreme personality of Godhead. Purport: without intelligence, one cannot understand the direct activities of the senses, nor can he understand the dreaming or cessation of all gross and subtle activities. The seer and controller of the Supreme Personality is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, by whose direction the individual soul can understand when he is awake, when he is sleeping, and when he is completely in trance. In Bhagavad Gita 15.15, the Lord says, Sarvasya chaham siddhi sannivishto, mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The living entities are completely absorbed in the three states of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep through their intelligence. This intelligence is supplied by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who accompanies the individual soul as a friend. Srila Madhvacharya says that the living entity is sometimes described as Sattva Buddhi, when his intelligence acts directly to perceive pains and pleasures above activities. There is a dreaming state in which understanding comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Madhya Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, is the supreme controller, and thus his direction, the living entities are subcontrollers. One must understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead with one's intelligence. Text 26. As one can understand the presence of the air by the aromas it carries, under the guidance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can understand the living soul by these three divisions of intelligence. These three divisions, however, are not in the soul. They're constituted of the material modes and are born of activities. Purport. As already explained, there are three states of our existence, namely wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. In all three states, we have different experiences. Thus, the soul is the observer of these three states. Actually, the activities of the body are not the activities of the soul. The soul is different from the body. Just as aromas are distinct from the material vehicle in which they are carried, the soul is unattached to material activities. This analysis can be considered by a person who is fully under the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. This is confirmed by Vedic injunction. Yasmin Vijnate Sarvam Evam Vijnatam Bhavanti. If one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can automatically understand everything else. Because of not taking shelter of of the Lord's lotus feet, even great scholars, scientists, philosophers, and religionists are always bewildered. This is confirmed in Bhagavatam 10 to 32. Na anya aravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvai astabhavet avishuddha buddhaya. Even though one may artificially think himself liberated from material contamination, if he has not taken shelter of the lotus feet, his intelligence is polluted. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:42, Indriyani paranyabhur, Indriyabhya paramamana, manastu para buddhir, yo buddhi paradastu saha. Above the senses is the mind, above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul. Ultimately, when one's intelligence becomes clear through devotional service, one is situated in Buddhi Yoga. This also is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Dadami Buddhi Yogantam Yena Mam Upayanti Te. When devotional service develops and one's intelligence becomes clear, one can use his intelligence to return home back to Godhead. Text 27. Through polluted intelligence, one is subjected to the modes of nature, and thus one is conditioned by material existence. Like a dreaming state in which one falsely suffers, material existence, which is due to ignorance, must be considered unwanted and temporary. Purport. The unwanted condition of temporary life is called ignorance. One can very easily understand that the material body is temporary, for it is generated at a certain date and ends at a certain date. After undergoing the six kinds of change, namely birth, death, maintenance, transformation, and dwindling. This condition of the eternal soul is due to his ignorance, and although it is temporary, it is unwanted because of ignorance. One can put into temporary bodies one after another. The spirit soul, however, does not need to enter such temporary bodies. He does so only due to his ignorance or his forgetfulness of Krishna. Therefore, in the human form of life, one's intelligence is developed. One should change his consciousness by trying to understand Krishna. Then one can be liberated. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.9, where the Lord says, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tatvataha tvaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam iti so Arjuna. One who knows transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving his body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Unless one understands that Krishna understands Krishna and comes to Krishna consciousness, one must continue in material bondage. To end this conditional life, one must surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, that is demanded by the Supreme Lord. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. As advised by Maharaj Rishabdev, na sadhu manye yato agmani ayam asan api kleshar ashade deha. One must be intelligent enough to understand that although one's body is temporary and will not endure for long, as long as one has a body, he must undergo the pangs of material existence. Therefore, if by good association, by the instructions of bona fide spiritual masters, one takes to Krishna consciousness, his conditional life of material existence is vanquished, and his original consciousness, known as Krishna consciousness, is revived. When one is Krishna conscious, he can realize that material existence, whether one is awake or dreaming or is nothing but a dream and has no factual value. This realization is possible by the grace of the Supreme Lord. This grace is also present in the form of the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is for everyone to engage in the welfare activities to awaken foolish living entities, especially in human societies, so that he may come to the platform of Krishna consciousness and benefit by liberation from conditional life. In this connection, Sri Madhvacharya cites the following words. Dukkha rupo api samsmara buddhi purvam avavyati yatha swapne shiram chedam swayam kritvatmano vasaha tato dukkham avavyeti tatho jagarito apitu jnanam api atmano dukkham avashastu pravartate. One must realize that the material condition of life is full of distresses. One can realize this with purified intelligence. When one's intelligence is purified, he can understand that unwanted temporary material life is just like a dream. Just as one suffers pains when his head is cut off in a dream, in ignorance one suffers only while dreaming, but also while awake. Without the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one continues in ignorance and is thus subjected to material distresses in various ways. 28. Therefore, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, your duty is to take the Krishna consciousness, which can burn the seed of fruitive activities and actually create. Therefore, O my friends, O sons of demons, your duty is to take to Krishna consciousness, which can burn the seed of fruitive activities artificially created by the modes of material nature and stop the flow of the intelligence in wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. In other words, when one takes to Krishna consciousness, his ignorance is immediately dissipated. Purport. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mamcha avya vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati taitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. By the practice of Bhakti Yoga, one immediately comes to the spiritual platform, transcendental to the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. The root of ignorance is material consciousness, which must be killed by spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness. The word Bijam Nirharanam refers to burning the root cause of material life, ashes. In the Medini dictionary, yoga is explained by its result. Yoga Purvartha Sampratyo Sangithyana Yuktisu. When one is put into an awkward position because of ignorance, the process by which one can be freed from this entanglement is called yoga. This is also called liberation. Muktir hitva rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. Mukti means giving up one's position in ignorance or illusion, by which one thinks in a way contrary to his constitutional position. Returning to one's constitutional position is called mukti, and the process by which one does this is called yoga. This yoga is about karma, jnana, and sankhya. Indeed, yoga is the ultimate goal of life. Krishna therefore advised Arjuna to become a yogi. Tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Krishna further advises in Bhagavad Gita that the first class yogi is he who has come to the platform of devotional service. Yoginam api sarvesham matkater antaratmanam shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. Of all yogis, one who always abides in me with great faith, worships me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. Thus, one who always thinks of Krishna within the core of his heart is the best yogi. By practicing this best of the yoga systems, one is liberated from material condition. Text 29. Of the different processes recommended for disentanglement from material existence, material life, the one personally explained and accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be considered all perfect. That process is the performance of duties by which love of the Supreme Lord develops. Purport. Among the linking processes that elevate one from bondage to material contamination, the one recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be accepted as the best. That process is clearly explained in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Abandon all kinds of religion and surrender unto me. This process is best because the Lord assures, Aham tvam sarva papibhyo mokshayishyami masuchaha. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. There is no need to be worried, for the Lord Himself assures that He will care for His devotee and save him from the reactions of sinful activities. Material bondage is a result of sinful activity. Therefore, since the Lord assures that He will dissipate the results, material bondage is a result of sinful activity. Therefore, since the Lord assures He will dispatch the result of fruitive material activities, there is no need to be worried. This process of understanding one's position as a spirit soul and then engaging oneself Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both Lord and the spiritual masters, all the imports of the Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. Shvetashvara Upanishad 6:23. One must accept the pure devotee, the representative of God, as one's guru, and then offer him all respects one would offer the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the secret of success. For one who adapts this method, the perfect process is revealed. In this verse, the words Yasyer Anjasarati indicates that by offering service and surrendering to the spiritual masters, one is elevated to devotional service. And by performing devotional service, one gradually becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, because of this attachment to the Lord, one can understand the Lord. In other words, one can understand what the Lord's position is, and what our position is, and what our relationship is. All this can be understood very easily by the simple method of Bhakti Yoga. As soon as one is situated on the platform of Bhakti Yoga, the root cause of all suffering and material bondage is destroyed. This is clearly explained in the next verse, which gives the secret of success. 30 and 31. One must accept the bona fide spiritual master and render service unto him with great devotion and faith. Whatever one has in one's possession should be offered to the spiritual master. And in the association of great persons, saintly persons, and devotees, one should worship the Lord, hear the glories of the Lord with faith, glorify the transcendental qualities and activities of the Lord, always meditate on the Lord's lotus feet, and worship the deity of the Lord strictly according to the injunctions of the Shastra and Guru. Purport. In the previous verse, it has been said that the process which immediately increases one's love and affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the best of many thousands of ways to become free from the entanglement of material existence. It is also said, Dharmasya tattvam niyatam bhukhayam. Actually, the truth of religious principles is extremely confidential. Nonetheless, it can be understood very easily if one develops the principle of religion. As it is said, Dharmas Sakshat Bhagavad Pranit. The process of religion is enunciated by the Supreme Lord because He is the supreme authority. This is also indicated in the previous verse by the word Bhagavatoditaha. The injunctions and directions of the Supreme Lord are infallible, and their benefits are fully absorbed. According to his direction, which is explained in this verse, the perfect form of religion is Bhakti Yoga. To practice Bhakti Yoga, one must accept a bona fide spiritual master. Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu advises Guru Padashraya Tasmat Krishna Diksha Shikshanam Vishwambarena Guru Seva Sadhu Vartmanu Vavartanam Sadharma Priksha Bhogati Tyajati Krishnasya Hetava. Our first duty is to accept a bona fide spiritual master. The student or disciple should be very inquisitive. He should be eager to know the complete truth about the eternal religion, Sanatan Dharma. In other words, Guru Shushrushaya means one should personally serve the spiritual master by giving him bodily comforts, help him in bathing, dressing, sleeping, eating, and so on. This is called Guru Shushrushyanam. A disciple should serve the spiritual master as a menial servant, and whatever he has in his possession should be dedicated to the spiritual master. Praner Arthar Diya Vacha. Everyone has his life, his wealth, his intelligence, and his words, and all of them should be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of the spiritual masters. Everything should be offered to the spiritual master as a matter of duty. But the offering should be made to the spiritual master with heart and soul, not artificially to gain material prestige. This offering is called arpana. However, one should live among devotees, saintly persons, to learn the etiquette and proper behavior of devotional service. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarked in this connection that whatever is offered to the spiritual master should be offered with love and affection. There must be some discrimination. Although a sadhu, a saintly person, can be saintly in his behavior, sadhuam sad acharya, unless one adheres to the spiritual behavior, one's position as a sadhu, a saintly person, is not complete. Therefore, a Vaishnava, a sadhu must completely adhere to the standard of behavior. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that a Vaishnava person initiated into the Vaishnava cult therefore should be offered the respect befitting a Vaishnava, which means that he should be offered service and prayers. However, one should not associate him with HIM if he is not a fit person with whom to associate. Text 32. One should always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his localized representation as Paramatma, who is situated in the core of everyone's heart. Thus, he should offer respects to every living entity according to the living entity's position and manifestation. Purport Hari Sarveshu Bhuteshu. This statement is sometimes misunderstood by unscrupulous persons who wrongly conclude that because Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is situated in every living entity is therefore Hari. Such foolish persons do not distinguish between the Atma and the Paramatma, which are situated in everybody. The Atma is the living entity, and Paramatma is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Hari Sarvasham Bhuteshu means that Hari is situated as Parampara, not as Atma. Although the Atma is a part of the Parampara, offering respects to every living entity means offering respect to Paramatma situated in everyone's heart. One should not misunderstand um, every living entity to be Paramatma. Sometimes unscrupulous persons designate a living entity as Daridra Narayan, Swayam Narayan, Iti Narayan, and Dat Narayan. One should carefully understand, although Narayana is situated in the core of the heart of every living entity, the living entity never becomes Narayana. Text 33. By these activities, as mentioned above, one is able to cut down the influence of enemies, namely lust, greed, illusion, and jealousy. And when thus situated, one can render service to the Lord. In this way, one surely attains to this platform of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport, as mentioned in verses 30 and 31, one's first duty is to approach the spiritual master, the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As mentioned in verse 30 and 31, one's first duty is to approach the spiritual master, the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to begin rendering service to him. Prahlad Maharaj proposed that from the very beginning of life, Kaumara Acharit Pragya, a small child should be trained to serve the spiritual master. And while living in the Gurukul, the Brahmachari Gurukuli Vasan Dantu Guru Hitam. This is the beginning of spiritual life. Guru Padashraya Sadhu Vartmanu Vartanam Sadharma Pricha. By following the instructions of the Guru and spiritual master, the disciple attains the stage of devotional service and becomes unattached to possessions. Whatever he possesses, he offers to the spiritual master, the Guru, who engages him in Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. The disciple follows strictly in the way he learns how to control his senses. Thus, by using his pure intelligence, he gradually becomes a lover of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed by Srila Rupa Goswami, Ado Shraddha Tatta Sadhu Sangha. In this way, one's life becomes perfect. His attachment for Krishna becomes positively manifest. In that stage, he is situated in ecstatic experiencing bhavna and anubhava, as explained in the following verse. Text 34. One who is situated in devotional service is certainly the controller of his senses. Thus, he is a liberated person. When such a liberated person, the pure devotee, hears of the transcendental qualities and activities of the Lord's incarnation for the performance of various pastimes, his hair stands on the end of his body. Tears fall from his eyes, and in his spiritual realization, his voice falters. Sometimes he very openly dances and therefore he sings. Thus he expresses his transcendental jubilation. Purport. The Lord's activities are uncommon. For example, when he appeared as Lord Ramachandra, he performed uncommon activities like bridging the ocean. Similarly, when Lord Krishna appeared, he raised the Govardhan hill when he was only 7 years old. These are uncommon activities. Fools and rascals who are not in the transcendental position consider these uncommon activities of the Lord to be mythological. But when the pure devotee, the liberated person, hears about these uncommon activities of the Lord, he immediately becomes ecstatic and exhibits the symptoms of chanting, dancing, and crying very loudly and jubilantly. That is the difference between a devotee and a non devotee. Text 35. When a devotee becomes like a person haunted by a ghost, he laughs and he loudly chants about the qualities of the Lord. Sometimes he sits to perform meditation and he offers respect to every living entity, considering him a devotee of the Lord. Constantly breathing very heavily, he becomes very careless in social etiquette and chants like a madman. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. O my Lord, O Master of the universe. Purport. When one chants the holy name of the Lord in ecstasy, not caring for outward social connections, it is to be understood that he is Atmamati. In other words, his consciousness is turned towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 36. The devotee is then freed from all material contamination because he is constantly thinking of the Lord's pastimes and because his mind and his body have been converted into spiritual qualities. Because of his intense loving service, his ignorance, material consciousness, and all kinds of material desires are completely burned to ashes. That is the stage at which one can achieve the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Purport. When a devotee is completely purified, he becomes Anyabhilashita Shunya. In other words, all his material desires become zero. Being burned to ashes, he exists either as the Lord's servant, friend, father, mother, or conjugal lover. Because one thinks constantly in this way, One's present material body and mind are fully spiritualized. The need of one's material body completely vanishes from one's existence. As iron rod put into fire becomes warmer and warmer, and when it is red hot, it is no longer an iron rod from fire. Similarly, when a devotee constantly engages in devotional service and thinks of the Lord in his original Krishna consciousness, he no longer has any material activities, for his body is spiritualized. Advancement in Krishna consciousness is very powerful. Therefore, even during this life, such a devotee has achieved the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. In this regard, Sri Madhvacharya writes as follows: Tad bhava bhava tad yatha swarupam bhavata kechid bhaktya printyanti gayanti cha yathevi me kashit tushnam eva kechid shobhya karina. The ecstatic condition of loving service was completely exhibited by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who sometimes danced, sometimes cried, sometimes sang, sometimes remained silent. Sometimes sang, sometimes remained silent, and sometimes chanted the holy name of the Lord. That is perfect spiritual existence. Text 37. The real problem of life is the repetition of birth and death, which is like a wheel rolling repeatedly up and down. This wheel, however, completely stops when one is in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, by the transcendental bliss realized by the constant engagement in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, by transcendental bliss realized from constant engagement in devotional service, one is completely liberated from material existence. All learned men know this. Therefore, my good friends, O son of the immediately begin immediately meditating upon and worshipping the supreme within everyone's heart. Purport: generally, it is understood that by merging into the existence of Brahman, the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, one becomes completely happy. The word Brahma Nirvana refers to connecting with the absolute truth, who is realized in three features: Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Shabdite. One feels Brahma Sukha, spiritual happiness, by merging into the impersonal Brahman, because the Brahma Jyoti is the effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanta Koti. Yasya Prabha, the impersonal Brahman, consists of the rays of Krishna's transcendental body. Therefore, whatever transcendental bliss one feels from merging into Brahman is due to contact with Krishna. Contact with Krishna is perfect, Brahma Sukha. When the mind is in touch with the impersonal Brahman, one becomes satisfied. But one must further advance to render service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One remains merged in the Brahman effulgence is not always assured. As it is stated, Aruha Krichena ya Paramam Padam Tat. As it is said, Aroha Krichena Param Padam tat patanti adho anardrita yusmad angraya. One may merge in the Brahman features of the absolute truth, but there is a chance one may fall down because of not being acquainted with Adhokshaja or Vasudeva. Of course, such Brahma Sukha unlimitedly eliminates material happiness. But when one advances through impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead in relation with Him as a servant, friend, parent, or conjugal lover, one's happiness becomes all pervading. Then one automatically feels transcendental bliss. Just as one becomes happy seeing the shining of the moon, one acquires natural happiness upon seeing the moon. But when one can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's transcendental happiness increases hundreds and thousands of times. As soon as one is very intimately connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one surely becomes free from all material contamination. Ya nivrittis tanu vritam. This cessation of all material happiness is called nivritti or nirvana. Srila Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Brahmanando bhavet esha chet paradhya gunikrita naiti bhakti sukha bhudye paramanu tulam api. If Brahman and the bliss of merging in the Brahman effulgence were multiplied 100 trillion times, it would not even equal an atomic fragment of the ocean of transcendental bliss felt in devotional service. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kanchati samas sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. One who is transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed towards all living entities. In that stage, he attains pure devotional service unto the Lord. If one advises for the Brahma Nirvana platform, he enters the stage of devotional service. Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. The word Adhokshajal Lamba refers to keeping the mind always engaged in the absolute truth, who's beyond the mind and material speculation. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. This is the result of deity worship. By constantly engaging in devotional service of the Lord and thinking of His lotus feet, one is automatically freed from all material contamination. Thus, the word Brahma Nirvana Sukham, indicates that one who is in touch with the absolute truth, material sense gratification is completely nullified. Text 38. O my friends, sons of the Asuras, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his super soul feature, always exists within the core of the hearts of all living entities. He is a well wisher and friend of all living entities. And there is no difficulty in worshipping the Lord. Why then should people not engage in his devotional service? Why are they not addicted to unnecessary producing artificial paraphernalia for sense gratification? Purport. Because the personality of Godhead is supreme, no one is equal or great, no one is equal, and no one is greater than him. Nonetheless, if one is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord is easily obtainable. The Lord is compared to the sky because the sky is vast, yet within the reach of all, not only human beings, but even of the animals. The Supreme Lord in his Paramatma feature exists as the best well wisher and friend. As confirmed in the Vedas, Sayujyo Sakyo, the Lord, in his super soul feature, always stays within the heart along with the living entity. The Lord is so friendly to the living entity that he remains within the heart so that one can always contact him without difficulty. One can do this simply by devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. As soon as one hears of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Krishna Kirtan, one immediately one can do this simply by devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. As soon as one hears of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna Kirtan, one immediately comes in touch with the Lord. A devotee immediately comes in touch with the Lord by any one of the items of devotional service. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakhyam Atmanivedanam. Therefore, there is no difficulty in coming in contact with the Supreme Lord. Koti Prayasa. On the other hand, going to hell requires great endeavor. If one wants to go to hell by illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, and intoxication, he must acquire so many things. For illicit sex, he must arrange for money for brothels. For meat eating, he must arrange for many slaughterhouses. For gambling, he must arrange for casinos and hotels. And for intoxication, he must open many breweries. Clearly, therefore, if one wants to go to hell, he must endeavor very much. But if he wants to return home back to Godhead, there is no difficult endeavor. To go back to Godhead, one may live alone anywhere in any condition and simply sit down, meditate upon the super soul, and chant and hear about the Lord. Thus, there is no difficulty in approaching the Lord. Adanta Govir Vishayanta Mishram. Because of inability to control the senses, one must go through great endeavor to go to hell. But if one is sensible, he can very easily obtain the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because the Lord is within him, always within him. By the simple method of Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, the Lord is satisfied. Indeed, the Lord says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati Tat Aham Bhakti Uparhitam Ashnami Prayatatmana. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I'll accept it. One can meditate upon the Lord anywhere and everywhere. Thus, Prahlad Maharaj advises his friends, the sons of the demons, to take this path back home, back to Godhead without difficulty. Text 39. One's riches, beautiful wife with and female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants, horses, one's treasury, economic development and sense gratification. Indeed, even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences are certainly temporary and flickering. Since the opportunity of human life is temporary, what benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Purport. This verse describes how the advocates of economic development are frustrated by the laws of nature. As the previous verse asks, Kim Vishayo Papa Dhanai, what is the actual benefit of so called economic development? The history of the world has factually proved that attempts to increase economic development of the for bodily comfort through the advancement of material civilization has nothing to remedy the inevitability of birth, death, old age, and disease. Everyone has knowledge of huge empires throughout the history of the world: the Roman Empire, the Mughal Empire, the British Empire, and so on. But all the societies engaged in such economic development, Survey Artha Kama, has been frustrated by the laws of nature through periodic wars, pestilence, famine, and so on. Thus, all their attempts have been proud of flickering and temporary. In other words, therefore it is said, Kurvanti Matyasya Kiyat Kriyakala. One may be very proud of possessing a vast empire, but such empires are impermanent. After 100 or 200 years, everything is finished. All such position of economic development, although created with great endeavor and hardship, are vanquished very soon. Therefore, they have been described as chalai. An intelligent man should conclude that economic development is not at all pleasing. The entire world is described in Bhagavad Gita as dukhalayam ashashasam, miserable and temporary. Economic development may be pleasing for some time, but it cannot endure. Thus, many businessmen are now very morose because they're being harassed by various plundering the governments. In conclusion, why should one waste his time for so called economic development, which is neither permanent nor pleasing to the soul? On the other hand, our relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is eternal. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. The pure souls are eternally in love with Krishna. And this permanent love, either as a servant, a friend, a parent, or a conjugal lover, is not at all difficult to revive. Especially in this age, the concession is that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, he revives his original relationship with God and thus becomes so happy that he does not want anything material. As enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitamba jagadisha kamaye. A very advanced devotee in Krishna consciousness does not want riches, followers, or possessions. Raya kalatram pasava sutadayo grihe mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya. The satisfaction of possessing material opulences, although perhaps of a different standard, is available even in the lives of dogs and hogs who can who cannot revive hogs and dogs who cannot revive their eternal relationship with Krishna. In human life, however, our eternal dormant relationship with Krishna is possible to revive. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj has described this life as Arthadam. Consequently, instead of wasting our time for economic development, which cannot give us any happiness, if we simply try to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna, we will properly utilize our lives. Text 40. It is learned from Vedic literature that by performing great sacrifices, one may elevate himself to heavenly planets. However, all the life on the heavenly planets is hundreds and thousands of times more comfortable than life on earth. The heavenly planets are not pure, nirmalam, or free from the taint of material existence. The heavenly planets are also temporary, and therefore they are not the goal of life. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, has not been seen or heard to possess inebriety. Consequently, for your own benefit and self realization, you must worship the Lord with great devotion as prescribed in the revealed scriptures. Purport, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Shine Punye Martya Lokam Vishanti. Even if one is promoted to the higher planetary systems by performing great sacrifices, which are accompanied by the simple act of sacrificing animals, the standard of happiness in Swargaloka is also not free of disturbances. There is a similar struggle for existence even for the king of heaven, Indra. Thus, there is no practical benefit in promoting oneself to the heavenly planets. Indeed, from the heavenly planets, one must return to this earth after one has exhausted the results of his pious activities. In the Vedas, it is said that yetaha karma jito loka shiyati evamutra Punya jito loka kshiyati. As the material possessions we acquire here by hard work are vanquished in true course of time, one's residence in heavenly planets is also eventually vanquished. According to one's activities of piety in different grades, one obtains different standards of life, but none of them are permanent and therefore they are all impure. Consequently, one should not endeavor to be promoted to the higher planetary systems, only to return to this earth or descend still lower to the hellish planets. To stop this cycle of going up and coming down, one must take to Krishna consciousness. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore said, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavanji, Guru Krishna Prasadipaya Bhakti Lata Bij. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 19:151. The living entity is rotating in the cycle of birth and death, sometimes g- going sometimes to the higher planets and sometimes to the lower planets. But that is not the solution to the problems of life. But if by the grace of Krishna one is fortunate enough to meet a guru, a representative of Krishna, one gets the clue to returning home back to Godhead. After achieving self realization, this is what is actually desirable. Bhajanatma labdhyate. One must take to Krishna consciousness for self realization. Text 41. A materialistic person, thinking himself very advanced in knowledge, continually acts for sense economic development. But again and again, he announced in the Vedas he is frustrated by material activities, either in this life or in the next. Indeed, the result one obtains are inevitably the opposite of those one desires. Purport: no one has ever achieved the results he desired from material activities. On the contrary, everyone has been frustrated again and again. Therefore, one must not waste his time in such material activities for sense pleasures, either in this life or the next. So many nationalists, economists, and other ambitious persons have tried for happiness, individually or collectively. But history proves that they have all been frustrated. In recent history, we have seen many political leaders work hard for individual and collective economic development, but they have all failed. That is the law of nature, as clearly explained in the next verse. In this material world, every materialistic desire to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. However, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. Purport: every conditioned soul is bound by the laws of material nature as described in Bhagavad Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. Everyone has achieved a certain type of body given by material nature according to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Trideshe Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. Bhagavad Gita 18.61. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, is present in everyone's heart. And as the living entity desires, the Lord gives him facilities with which to work according to his ambitions in different grades of bodies. The body is just an instrument by which the living entity moves according to false desires for happiness and thus suffers the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease in different standards of life. Everyone begins his activities with some plan and ambition, but actually, from the beginning of one's plan to the end, one does not derive any happiness. On the contrary, as soon as one begins acting according to his plan, his life of distress immediately begins. Therefore, one should not be ambitious to dissipate the unhappy conditions of life, for one cannot do anything about them. Ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. Although one is acting according to false ambitions, he thinks he can improve his material conditions by his activities. The Vedas enjoin that one should not try to increase happiness or decrease distress, for this is futile. Tasyeva hetu priyateta kovidai. One should work for self realization, not for economic development, which is impossible to improve. Without endeavor, one cannot get the amount of happiness and distress for which he is destined, and one cannot change it. Therefore, it is better to use one's time for advancement in spiritual life of Krishna consciousness. One should not waste his valuable life as a human being. It is better to utilize this life for developing Krishna consciousness without ambitions for so called happiness. Text 43. A living entity desires comfort for his body and makes plans for this purpose. But actually, the body is the property of others. Indeed, the perishable body embraces the living entity and then leaves him aside. Purport. Everyone desires comfort of his body and tries to make a suitable situation for this purpose, forgetting that this body is meant to be eaten by dogs, jackals, or moths, and thus turned into useless to ashes or earth. The living entity wastes his time in a futile attempt to gain material possessions for the comfort of one body after another. Text 44. Since the body itself is ultimately made to become stool or earth, what is the meaning of the paraphernalia related to the body, such as wives, residences, wealth, children, relatives, servants, friends, kingdoms, treasuries, animals, and ministers? They are also temporary. What more can be said about this? 45. All this paraphernalia is very near and dear as long as the body exists. But as soon as the body is destroyed, all things related to the body are also finished. Therefore, actually, one has nothing to do with them. But because of ignorance, one accepts them as valuable. They are most insignificant. What is the use of such insignificant relationships of the eternal living being? Purport. Krishna consciousness, devotional service to Krishna is the ocean of material eternal bliss. In comparison to this eternal bliss, the so-called happiness of society, friendship, and love is simply useless and insignificant. One should therefore not be attached to temporary things. One should take to Krishna consciousness and become eternally happy. My dear friends, O sons of Asuras, the living entity receives different types of bodies according to his previous fruitive activities. Thus, he is seen to suffer with reference to his particular body in all conditions of life, beginning with his infusion into the womb. Please tell me, therefore, after full consideration, what is the living entity's actual interest in fruitive activities, which result in hardship and misery? Purport. Karmana daivanetrena jantur deho papatyaye. The living entity receives a particular type of body according to his karma or fruitive activities. The material pleasure derived in material world from one's particular body is based on sexual pleasures. Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukham hitucham. The entire world is working so hard only for sexual pleasure. To enjoy sexual pleasure and maintain the status quo of material life, one must work very hard. And because of such activities, one prepares himself another material body. Prahlad Maharaj places this matter to his friends, the Asuras, for their consideration. Asuras generally cannot understand that the objects of sexual pleasure, the so called pleasure of materialistic life, depends on extremely hard labor. 47. The living entity who has received his present body because of his past fruitive activities may end the result of his actions in this life, but this does not mean that he is liberated from bondage to material bodies. The living entity receives one type of body, and by performing actions with that body, he creates another. Thus, he transmigrates from one body to another through repeated birth and death because of his gross ignorance. Purport: the living entity's evolution through different types of bodies is conducted automatically by the laws of nature in bodies other than those of human beings. In other words, by the laws of nature, Prakriti Kriyamanani, the living entity evolves from lower grades of life to the human form. Because of his developed consciousness, however, the living being must understand the constitutional position of the living entity and understand why he must accept a material body. This chance is given to him by nature. But if he, nonetheless, acts like an animal, which is what is the benefit of his human life, in this life, one must select the goal of life and act accordingly. Having received instructions from the spiritual master and the Shastra, one must be sufficiently intelligent. In the human form of life, one should not remain foolish and ignorant, but must inquire about his constitutional positions. This is called Athatu Brahma Jigyasa. The human psychology gives rise to many questions, which various philosophers have considered and answered with various types of philosophy based upon mental concoction. This is not the way of liberation. The Vedic instructions says, Tad Vijnanartham Sagurum Abhigachit. To solve the problems of life, one must accept a spiritual master. Tasmat Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyas Shreya Uttamam. If one is actually serious in inquiring about solution to material existence, one must approach a bona fide guru. Tat vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinam. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master by surrendering himself, pranipatena, and rendering service. An intelligent person must inquire from the spiritual master about the goal of life. A bona fide spiritual master can answer all questions because he has seen the real truth. Even in ordinary activities, we first consider gain and loss and then we act. Similarly, an intelligent person must consider the entire process of material existence and then act intelligently following the directions of the bona fide spiritual master. Text 48. The four principles of advancement in spiritual life, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, all depend on the disposition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, my dear friends, follow in the footsteps of devotees. Without desire, fully depend upon the disposition of the Supreme Lord. Worship Him, the Super Soul, in devotional service. Purport. These are words of intelligence. Everyone should know that in every stage of life, we are dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the dharma, religion, which we accept should be that which is recommended by Prahlad Maharaj, Bhagavad Dharma. This is the instruction of Krishna, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. To take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna means to act according to the rules and regulations of Bhagavad Dharma, devotional service. As far as economic development is concerned, we should discharge our occupational duties, but fully depend on the lotus feet of the Lord for the results. Karmani eva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachanam. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. According to one's position, one should perform his duties, but for the results, one should fully depend upon Krishna. Narottam Das Thakur sings that our only desire should be to perform the duties of Krishna consciousness. We should not be misled by the karma mamsa philosophy, which concludes that if we work seriously, the results will come automatically. This is not a fact. The ultimate result depends upon the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In devotional service, therefore, the devotee completely depends upon the Lord and honestly performs his occupational duties. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj advised his friends to depend completely on Krishna and worship him in devotional service. Text 49. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the soul and super soul of all living entities. Every living entity is a manifestation of his energy in terms of the living soul and the material body. Therefore, the Lord is most dear and he is the supreme controller. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is manifested by his different energies: the material energy, the spiritual energy, and the marginal energy. He is the original source of all living entities in the material world, and he is situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. Although the living entity is the cause of his various types of bodies, the body is given by material nature according to the order of the Lord. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hriddeshe Arjuna Tishtati. Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. The body is just like a machine, a car, in which the living entity is given a chance to sit and move according to his desire. The Lord is the original cause of the material body and the soul, which is expanded by his marginal energy. The Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of all living entities. Prahlad Maharaj therefore advises his class friends, the sons of the demons, to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead again. Text 15. If a demigod, demon, human being, yaksha, gandharva, or anyone within this universe renders service to the lotus feet of Mukunda, who can deliver liberation, he is actually situated in the most auspicious condition of life. Exactly like us, the Mahajanas, headed by Prahlad Maharaj. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj, by his living example, requested his friends to engage in devotional service. Whether in demigod society, Asura society, human society, or Gandharva society, every living entity should take shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda and thus become perfect in good fortune. My dear friends, O son of demons, you cannot please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by becoming perfect Brahmanas, demigods, or great saints, or becoming perfectly good in etiquette or vast learning. None of these qualifications can awaken the pleasure of the Lord, nor by charity, austerity, sacrifice, cleanliness, or vows can one satisfy the Lord. The Lord is pleased only if one has unflinching, unalloyed devotion to Him. Without sincere devotional service, everything is simply a show. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj concludes that one can become perfect by serving the Supreme Lord sincerely by all means. Material elevation to life as a Brahmana, demigod, rishi, and so on are not causes for developing love of Godhead. But if one sincerely engages in the service of the Lord, his Krishna consciousness is complete. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Api chet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhav sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. Even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. To develop unalloyed love for Krishna is the perfection of life. Other processes may be helpful, but if one does not develop his love for Krishna, these other processes are simply a waste of time. Dharmasthanu pumsam visvakshena kathasuyaha no na utpataye yadiratam shram eva hi kevalam. Duties executed by men, regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor if They do not provoke attraction to the message of the Supreme Lord. The test of perfection is one's unalloyed devotion to the Lord. Text 53. My dear friends, O sons of the demons, in some favorable way, that one sees himself and takes care of himself, takes to devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present everywhere as a super soul of all living entities. Purport. The word Atma Opamayena refers to thinking others to be like oneself. One can very intelligently conclude that without devotional service, without becoming Krishna conscious, one cannot be happy. Therefore, the duty of all devotees is to preach Krishna consciousness everywhere, all over the world, because all living entities without Krishna consciousness are suffering the pangs of material existence. To preach Krishna consciousness is the best welfare activity. Indeed, it is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as para upakar, work for true benefit of others. The activities of para upakar have been specially entrusted to those who have taken birth in India as human beings. भारत भूमि ते होइला मनुष्य जन्म यार जन्म सार्थक करी करो परोपकार Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 941. The entire world is suffering for want of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised all human beings born in India to make their lives perfect by Krishna consciousness and then preach the gospel of Krishna consciousness all over the world so that others may become happy by executing the principles of Krishna consciousness. Text 54. O my friends, O son of demons, everyone, including you, yakshas and rakshasas, the unintelligent women, shudras and cowherd boys, birds, the lower animals, and the sinful living entities can revive his original eternal spiritual life and exist forever simply by accepting the principles of Bhakti Yoga. Purport. The devotees are referred to as Achyuta Gotra or dynasty of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is called Achyuta as indicated in Bhagavad Gita. Senayor Ubayor Madhye Ratham Sthapaye Me Achyuta. The Lord is infallible in material world because he is the supreme spiritual person. Similarly, the jivas who are part and parcels of the Lord can also become infallible. Although Prahlad's mother was in the conditional state and was the wife of a demon, even yakshas, rakshasas, women, shudras, and even birds and other lower living entities can be elevated to the Achyuta Gotra, the family of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the highest perfection. As Krishna never falls, when we revive our spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, we never fall again to material existence. One should understand the position of the Supreme Achyuta Krishna, who says in Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Janma karma chame devyam evam yo veti tattvataha tatvateham punarjanma naiti mam iti so Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my spiritual abode, O Arjuna. One should understand Achyuta, the supreme and infallible, and how we are related with him. And one should take to the service of the Lord. That is the perfection of life. Srila Madhvacharya says, Achyutam Chuti Varjanam. The word Achyutam refers to one who never falls to this material world but always remains in the Vaikuntha world, fully engaged in the service of the Lord. Text 55. In this material world, to render service to the lotus feet of Govinda, the cause of all causes is to see him everywhere, is the only goal of life. This much alone is the ultimate goal of human life, as explained by all the revealed scriptures. Purport. In this verse, the word Sarvatra Tad Ikshanam describes the highest perfection of devotional service, in which one sees everything with reference to Govinda's activities. The highly elevated devotee never sees anything unrelated to Govinda. स्थावर जंग्यम देखी न देखी तत्र मूर्ति स्थावरम ह निज इष्ट देह स्फूर्ति. The Mahabhagavata, the advanced devotee, certainly sees everything mobile and immobile, but he does not exactly see their forms. Rather, everywhere he immediately sees manifest the form of the Supreme Lord. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, 8-74. Not see materially manifested things. Instead, he sees Govinda in everything. When he sees a tree or a human being, a devotee sees them in relation to Govinda. Govindam Adi Purusham. Govinda is the original source of everything. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He is an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. The test of the perfect devotee is that he sees Govinda everywhere in this universe, even in every atomic particle. Antantara stha paramanu chayantarastham. This is the perfect vision of a devotee. It is therefore said, Narayanam Mayam Dhira Pashyanti Paramarthina Jagat Dhana Mayam Lubda Kamuka Kamina Mayam. A devotee sees everyone and everything in relation to Narayana. Narayana Mayam. Everything is an expansion of Narayana's energy. Just as those who are greedy see everything as a source of money making, and those who are lusty see everything as being conducive to sex. The most perfect devotee, Prahlad Maharaj, saw Narayan even within a stone column. This does not mean, however, that we must accept the word Daridra Narayan, which has been manufactured by some unscrupulous person. One who actually envisions Narayan everywhere makes no distinction between the poor and the rich. To single out the Daridra Narayan or poor Narayan and reject the Dhani Narayan or rich Narayan is not the vision of a devotee. Rather, that is the imperfect vision of materialistic persons. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport to the seventh canto, seventh chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled What Prahlad Learned in the Womb. Chapter 8. Lord Nrsimhadeva slays the king of the demons. As described in this chapter, Hiranyakashipu was ready to kill his own son, Prahlad Maharaj. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared in front of the demon as Sri Nrikesari, half lion and half man, and killed him. Following the instructions of Prahlad Maharaj, all the sons of the demons became attached to Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When this attachment became pronounced, their teachers, Sanda and Amarka, were very much afraid that the boys would become more and more devoted to the Lord. In a helpless condition, they approached Hiranyakashipu and described in detail the effect of Prahlad's preaching. After hearing of this, Hiranyakashipu decided to kill his son, Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu was so angry that Prahlad Maharaj fell down at his feet and said many things just to pacify him. But he was unsuccessful in satisfying his demoniac fathers. Hiranyakashipu, as a typical demon, began to advertise himself as being greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Prahlad challenged him, saying that Hiranyakashipu was not God, and began to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, declaring that the Lord is all pervading and that everything is under him, and that no one is equal to or greater than him. Thus, he requested his father to be submissive to the omnipotent Supreme Lord. The more Prahlad Maharaj glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the more angry and agitated the demon became. Hiranyakashipu asked his Vaishnav son whether his god existed within the columns of the palace. And Prahlad Maharaj immediately accepted that since the Lord is present everywhere, he is also present within the columns. When Hiranyakashipu heard this philosophy from his young son, he derided the boy's statement just as the talk of a child and forcefully struck the pillar with his fist. As soon as Hiranyakashipu struck the column, there issued forth a tumultuous sound. At first, Hiranyakashipu, the king of demons, could not see anything but the pillar. But to substantiate Prahlad's statements, the Lord came out of the pillar in his wonderful incarnation as Nrsimha, half lion and half man. Hiranyakashipu could immediately understand that the wonderful, extraordinarily wonderful form of the Lord was surely meant for his death. And thus he prepared to fight with the form of half lion and half man. The Lord performed his pastimes by fighting with the demon for some time. And in the evening, on the border between day and night, the Lord captured the demon, threw him on his lap, and killed him by piercing his abdomen with his nails. The Lord not only killed Hiranyakashipu, king of demons, but also killed many of his followers. When there was no one else to fight, the Lord, roaring with anger, sat down on Hiranyakashipu's throne. The entire universe was thus relieved of the rule of Hiranyakashipu, and everyone was jubilant in transcendental bliss. Then even the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, approached the Lord. These included the saintly persons, the Pittas, the Siddhas, the Vidyadharas, the Nagas, the Manus, the Prajapatis, the Gandharvas, the Chanaras, the Yakshas, the Kimpurushas, the Vaitilikas, the Kinnaras, and many other varieties of beings in human form. All of them stood not far from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and began offering their prayers unto the Lord, whose spiritual effulgence was brilliant as he sat on the throne. Text 1. Narad Muni continued. As the son of the demons appreciated the transcendental instructions of Prahlad Maharaj and took them very seriously, they rejected the materialistic instructions given by their teachers, Sanda and Amarka. Purport. This is the effect of preaching of a pure devotee like Prahlad Maharaj. If a devotee is qualified, sincere, and serious about Krishna consciousness, and if he follows the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master, as Prahlad Maharaj did, when preaching the instructions he had received from Narad Muni, his preaching is effective. As it is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana katha. If one tries to understand the discourse given by the Sat or pure devotees, those instructions will be very much pleasing to the ear and appealing to the heart. Thus, if one is inspired to take to Krishna consciousness, and if one practices the process in his life, he is surely successful in returning home back to Godhead. By the grace of Prahlad Maharaj, all his class friends, the sons of the demons, became Vaishnavas. They did not like hearing from so called teachers, Sanda and Amarka, who were interested only in teaching them about diplomacy, politics, economic development, and similar topics meant exclusively for sense gratification. Text 2. When Sanda and Amarka, the sons of Sukracharya, observed that all the students, the sons of the demons, were becoming advanced in Krishna consciousness because of the association of Prahlad Maharaj, they were afraid. They approached the king of demons and described the situation as it is. Purport. The words Buddhim Ekanta Samstita indicates that as an effect of Prahlad Maharaj's preaching, the students who listened to him became fixed in the conclusion that Krishna consciousness is the only object of human life. The fact is that anyone who associates with a pure devotee and follows his instruction becomes fixed in Krishna consciousness and is not disturbed by materialistic consciousness. The teachers particularly observed this in their students, and therefore they were afraid because the whole community of students were gradually becoming Krishna conscious. When Hiranyakashipu understood the entire situation, he was extremely angry, so much so that his body trembled. Thus, he finally decided to kill his son. Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu was by nature very cruel, and feeling insulted, he began hissing like a snake, trampled upon by someone's foot. His son Prahlad was peaceful, mild, and gentle. His senses were under control, and he stood before Hiranyakashipu with folded hands. According to Prahlad's age and behavior, he was not to be chastised. Yet, with staring, crooked eyes, Hiranyakashipu rebuked him with the following harsh words. Purport. When one is impudent towards a highly authorized devotee, one is punished by the laws of nature. The duration of his life is diminished, and he loses the blessings of superior persons and the results of auspicious activities. Hiranyakashipu, for example, had achieved such a great powers in the material world that he could subdue practically all the planetary systems in the universe, including the heavenly planets, Swargaloka. Yet now, because of his mistreatment of such a Vaishnava as Prahlad Maharaj, all the results of his tapasya diminished. As stated in Bhagavatam 10:446, Ayushriyam yo dharma lokan ashisha evacha hanti shreyamsi sarvani pumso mahat atikramaha. One who mistreats great souls, his lifespan, opulence, reputation, religion, possessions, and good fortune are all destroyed. Text 5. Hiranyakashipu said, O impudent one, O most unintelligent disruptor of the family, O lowest of mankind, you have violated my power to rule you. Therefore, you are an obstinate fool. Today I shall send you to the palace of Yamaraj. Purport. Hiranyakashipu condemned his Vaishnav son Prahlad for being durviniti, ungentle, uncivilized, or impudent. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, however, has derived a meaning from this word, durviniti, durvinita, by the mercy of the goddess of learning Saraswati. He says that Du refers to this material world. This is confirmed by Lord Krishna in his instruction in Bhagavad Gita that this material world is Dukhalayam, full of material conditions. Vi means Vishesha, specifically, and Niti means brought in. By the mercy of the Supreme Lord, Prahlad Maharaj was specially brought to this material world to teach people how to get out of material condition. Lord Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. When the entire population or part of it becomes forgetful of his own duty, Krishna comes. When Krishna is not present, the devotee is present. But the mission is the same, to free the poor conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya that chastises them. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur further explains that the word mandatmana means manda, very bad or very slow in spiritual realization. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.10, manda sumanda matayo, manda bhagya. Prahlad Maharaj is the guide of all the mandas or bad living entities who are under the influence of Maya. He is the benefactor even of the slow and bad living entities in this material world. Gulabheda Kuradham. By his actions, Prahlad Maharaj made great personalities who established big families seem insignificant. Everyone is interested in his own family and in making his destiny, dynasty famous. But Prahlad Maharaj was so liberal that he made no distinction between one living entity and another. Therefore, he was greater than the great Prajapatis who established the dynasties. The word stabdam means obstinate. A devotee does not care for the instructions of the asuras. When they gave instructions, he remains silent. A devotee cares about the instructions of Krishna, not those of demons or non devotees. He does not give any respect to a demon, and even though the demon be his father. Mad chas chasano dvitam. Prahlad Maharaj was disobedient to the orders of his demoniac father, Yamakshayam. Every conditioned soul is under the control of Yamaraj. But Hiranyakashipu said that he considered Prahlad Maharaj his deliverer. For Prahlad would stop Hiranyakashipu's repetition of birth and death. Because Prahlad Maharaj was a great devotee, was better than any yogi, Hiranyakashipu was to be brought among the society of bhakti yogis. Thus, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has explained these words in a very interesting way, as they can be interpreted from the side of Saraswati, the mother of learning. Text 6. My son Prahlad, you rascal, you know that when I am angry, all the planets of the three worlds tremble, along with their chief rulers, by whose power so you appear fearless and overstep my power to rule you. Purport. The relationship between a pure devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is extremely relishable. A devotee never claims to be very powerful himself. Instead, he fully surrenders to the lotus feet of Krishna, being confident that in all dangerous conditions, Krishna will protect his devotee. Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. O son of Kunti, declare boldly that my devotee never perishes. The Lord requested Arjuna to declare this instead of declaring it himself because sometimes Krishna changes his view and therefore people may not believe him. Thus, Krishna asks Arjuna to declare that a devotee of the Lord is never vanquished. Hiranyakashipu was perplexed about his 5-year-old son could be so fearless that he did not care for the order of his very great and powerful father. A devotee cannot execute the order of anyone except the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the position of a devotee. Hiranyakashipu could not understand that this boy must have been very powerful since the son did not heed his orders. Hiranyakashipu asked his son, Kimbala, how did you overcome my orders? By whose strength have you done this? Text 7, translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, My dear king, the source of my strength, of which you are asking, is also the source of yours. Indeed, the original source of all kinds of strength is one. He is not only your strength or mine, but the only strength for everyone. Without him, no one can get any strength, whether moving or not moving, superior or inferior. Everyone, including Lord Brahma, is controlled by the strength of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yat Yat Vibhutatma Sattvam Srimad Ujrati Evat Evava Tat Tat Eva Gachatvam Mama Tejamsi Sambhavam. Knowing that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations sprung from but a spark of my splendor. This is confirmed by Prahlad Maharaj. If one sees extraordinary strength or power anywhere, it is derived from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To give an example, there are different grades of fire, but all of them derive heat and light from the sun. Similarly, all living entities, big or small, are dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One's only duty is to surrender, for one is a servant and cannot independently attain the position of master. One cannot attain the position of a master only by the mercy of the master, not independently. Unless one understands this philosophy, he is still a Muda. In other words, he is not very intelligent. The Mudas, the asses who do not have this intelligence, cannot surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Understanding the subordinate position of the living entity takes millions of births. But when one is actually wise, he surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanamam Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Prahlad Maharaj was a great soul, a Mahatma, and therefore he completely surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord. He was confident that Krishna would give him protection under all circumstances. Ethics 58. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the supreme controller and time factor, is the power of the senses, the power of the mind, the power of the body, and the vital force of the senses. His influence is unlimited. He is the best of all living entities, the controller of the three modes of material nature. By his own power, he creates this cosmic manifestation, maintains it, and annihilates it also. Purport: since the material world is being moved by the three modes of nature, of three material modes, and since the Lord is their master, the Lord can create, maintain, and destroy the material world. 6.9. Prahlad Maharaj continued, My dear father, please give up your demoniac mentality. Do not discriminate in your heart between enemies and friends. Make your mind equipoise towards everyone. Except for the uncontrolled and misguided mind, there is no enemy within this world. When no one sees everyone on the when one sees everyone on the platform of equality, one then comes to the position of worshipping the Lord perfectly. Purport. When one is able to fix the mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, the mind is impossible to control. As Arjun says in Bhagavad Gita, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna, Pramati balavat dridam, tasyaham dirham manye, vayur iva suduksharam, sudukaram. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, it seems to me, is more difficult than controlling the wind. The only bona fide process for controlling the mind is to fix the mind by the service of the Lord. We create enemies and friends according to the dictation of the mind. But actually, there are no enemies and friends. Pandita Samadarshina Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. To understand this is the preliminary condition for entering into the kingdom of devotional service. Text 10. In former times, there were many fools like you who did not conquer the six enemies that steal away the wealth of the body. Those fools were very proud, thinking, I have conquered all enemies in all 10 directions. But if a person is victorious over the six enemies and is equipoised to all living entities, for him there are no enemies. Enemies are merely imagined by one in ignorance. Purport. In the material world, everyone thinks that he has conquered his enemies, not understanding that his enemies are his uncontrolled mind and five senses. Manashashtani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. In this material world, everyone has become a servant of the senses. Originally, everyone is a servant of Krishna, but in ignorance, one forgets this, and thus one is engaged in the service of Maya through lusty desires, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and jealousy. Everyone is actually dependent on the reactions of material laws. But still, one thinks himself independent and thinks he has conquered all directions. In conclusion, one who thinks that he has many enemies is an ignorant man, whereas one who is in Krishna consciousness knows that there are no enemies but those within himself, the uncontrolled mind and senses. Text 11, Hiranyakashipu replied, You rascal, you're trying to minimize my value, as if you're better than me at controlling the senses. This is over intelligent. I can therefore understand that you desire to die at my hands. But this kind of nonsensical talk is indulged in by those about to die. Purport. It is said in Hitopadesha, Upadesho hi murkhanam prakopaye na shantaye. If good instructions are given to a foolish person, he does not take advantage of them, but becomes more and more angry. Prahlad Maharaj's unauthorized instructions to his father were not accepted by Hiranyakashipu as truth. Instead, Hiranyakashipu became increasingly angry at his great son, who was a pure devotee. This kind of difficulty always exists when a devotee preaches Krishna consciousness to persons like Hiranyakashipu who are interested in money and women. The word Hiranya means gold and Kashipu refers to the cushions or good bedding. Moreover, a father does not like to be instructed by his son, especially if the father is a demon. Prahlad Maharaj's Vaishnav preaching to his demoniac fathers was indirectly effective. But because Hiranyakashipu's excessive jealousy of Krishna and his devotee was inviting Nrsimhadeva to kill him very quickly, thus he was expediting his being killed by the Lord himself. Although Hiranyakashipu was a demon, he was described here by the word Shri. Why? The answer is that fortunately he was such a great devotee, son, as Prahlad Maharaj. Thus, although he was a demon, he would attain salvation and return home back to Godhead. Text 12. O most fortunate Prahlad, you have always described a supreme being other than me, a supreme being who is above everything, who's the controller of everyone, who's all pervading. But where is he? If he is everywhere, then why is he not present before me in this pillar? Purport. Demons sometimes declare to a devotee that they cannot escape the existence of God because he cannot see him. But what the demon does not know is stated by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 7:25. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavritam. I'm never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I'm covered by yoga maya. The Lord is open to be seen by devotees, but non-devotees cannot see him. The qualification for seeing God is stated in Brahma Samhita. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santas sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti. A devotee who has developed a genuine love for Krishna can always see him everywhere, whereas a demon, not having a clear understanding of the Supreme Lord, cannot see him. When Hiranyakashipu was threatening to kill Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad certainly saw the columns standing before him and his father, and he saw the Lord was present in the pillars to encourage him not to fear his demoniac father's words. The Lord was present to protect him. Hiranyakashipu marked Prahlad's observation and asked him, "Where is your God?" Prahlad Maharaj replied, "He is everywhere." Then Hiranyakashipu asked, "Why is he not in this pillar before me?" Thus, in all circumstances, the devotee can see the Supreme Lord, whereas the non devotee cannot. Prahlad Maharaj was here being addressed by his father as the most unfortunate. Hiranyakashipu thought himself extremely fortunate because he possessed the property of the universe. Prahlad Maharaj, his legitimate son, was to have inherited this vast property. But because of his impudence, he was going to die at his father's hands. Therefore, the demoniac father considered Prahlad the most unfortunate because Prahlad would not be able to inherit his property. Hiranyakashipu did not know that Prahlad was the most fortunate person within the three worlds because Prahlad was protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such are the misunderstandings of demons. They do not know that the devotee is protected by the Lord in all circumstances. Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. Text 13. Because you're speaking so much nonsense, I shall now sever your head from your body. Now let me see your most worshipable God come to protect you. I want to see it. Purport. Demons always think that the God of the devotees is fictitious. They think that there is no God, and the so called religious feeling of devotion to God is but an opiate, a kind of illusion, like the illusions derived from LSD and opium. Hiranyakashipu did not believe Prahlad Maharaj when Prahlad asserted that his Lord is present everywhere. Because Hiranyakashipu was a typical demon, was convinced that there was no God and that no one could protect Prahlad, he felt encouraged to kill his son. He challenged the idea that the devotee is always protected by the Supreme Lord. 14. Being obsessed with anger, Hiranyakashipu, who was very great in bodily strength, thus chastised his exalted devotee son Prahlad with harsh words. Cursing him again and again, Hiranyakashipu took up his sword and got up from his royal throne, and with great anger struck his fist against the column. Text 15. Then from within the pillar came a fearful sound, which appeared to crack the covering of the universe. O dear Yudhishthir, the sun reached even the abodes of the demigods like Lord Brahma. And when the demigods heard it, they thought, "Oh, now our parents are being destroyed." Purport. As we sometimes become very much afraid at the sound of a thunderbolt, perhaps thinking that our houses will be destroyed, the great demigods like Lord Brahma feared the thundering sound that came from the pillar in front of Hiranyakashipu. Text 16. While showing his extraordinary prowess, Hiranyakashipu, who desired to kill his own son, heard that wonderful tumultuous sound which had never been heard. Upon hearing the sound, the great leaders of the demons were afraid. None of them could find the origin of the sound in the assembly. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself explains himself by saying, Rasoham api kaunteya prabhasmi shashisurayo pranava sarva vedeshu shabdam kya paurusham rishu. O son of Kunti, Arjun, I am the taste of bottle, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras, and the sound neither an ability in man. Here the Lord exhibited his presence everywhere by the tumultuous sound in the sky. Shabdekhe. The tumultuous thundering sound was proof of the Lord's presence. The demons like Hiranyakashipu could now realize the supreme ruling power of the Lord. And thus Hiranyakashipu became afraid. However powerful a man may be, he always fears the sound of a thunderbolt. Similarly, Hiranyakashipu and all the demons who were his associates were extremely afraid because of the presence of the Supreme Lord in the form of sound, although they could not trace the source of the sound. Text 17. To prove the statement of his servant Prahlad Maharaj was substantial, and in other words, to prove that the Supreme Lord is present everywhere, even within the pillar of an assembly hall, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari exhibited a wonderful form never seen before. The form was neither that of a man nor that of a lion. Thus the Lord appeared in his wonderful form in the assembly hall. Purport. When Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlad Maharaj, Where is your Lord? Is he present in this pillar? Prahlad Maharaj fearlessly replied, Yes, my Lord is present everywhere. Therefore, to convince Hiranyakashipu that the statement of Prahlad Maharaj was unmistakably true, the Lord appeared from the pillar. The Lord appeared as half lion and half man, so that Hiranyakashipu could not understand whether the great giant was a lion or a human being. To substantiate Prahlad's statement, the Lord proved that his devotee, as declared in Bhagavad Gita, is never vanquished. Kauntehi pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Prahlad Maharaj's demoniac father had repeatedly threatened to kill Prahlad, but Prahlad was confident that he could not be killed since he was protected by the Supreme Lord. By appearing from the pillars, the Lord encouraged his devotees, saying in effect, Do not worry, I'm present here. By manifesting his form as Nrsimhadeva, the Lord also preserved the truth of Lord Brahma's promise that Hiranyakashipu could not be killed by any animal or any man. The Lord appeared in a form that could not be said to be fully a man or a lion. 18. When Hiranyakashipu looked all around to find the source of the sound, that wonderful form of the Lord, which could not be ascertained either to be either a man or a lion, emerged from the pillar. In amazement, Hiranyakashipu wondered, What is this creature that is half man and half lion? Purport. A demon cannot calculate the unlimited potency of the Supreme Lord. As stated in the Vedas, Parasya Shakti Vividhaya Shruyate, Swabhavike Jnana Bala Kriyacha. The different potencies of the Lord are always working in an automatic exhibition of his knowledge. For a demon, it is certainly wonderful that the form of a Lord, of a lion, and the form of a man can be united. Since the demon has no experience of the inconceivable powers for which the Supreme Lord is called all powerful, demons cannot understand the omnipotence of the Lord. They simply compare the Lord to one of them. Avajananti mam mudha manusham tanumashritam. Muda, rascals, think that Krishna is an ordinary human being who appears for the benefit of other human beings. Param bhavam ajananta. Fools, rascals, and demons cannot realize the supreme potency of the Lord. But he can do anything and everything. Indeed, he can do whatever he likes. When Hiranyakashipu received benedictions from Lord Brahma, he thought that he was safe, since he had received the benediction that he would not be killed either by an animal or by a human being. He never thought of an animal and human being could be combined so that the demons like him would be puzzled by such a form. This is the meaning of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's omnipotence.
Text 19 to 22. Translation. Hiranyakashipu studied the form of the Lord, trying to decide who the form of Nrsimhadeva standing before him was. The Lord's form was extremely fearsome because of his angry eyes, which resembled molten gold, his shining mane, which expanded the dimensions of his fearful face, his deadly teeth, and his razor sharp tongue, which moved about like a dueling sword. His ears were erect and motionless, and his nostrils and gaping mouth appeared like caves of a mountain. His jaws parted fearfully, and his entire body touched the sky. His neck was very short and thick, his chest broad, his waist thin, and the hairs on his body as white as the rays of the moon. His arms, which resembled flanks of soldiers, spread in all directions as he killed the demons, rogues, and atheists with his conchal, disc, club, lotus, and other natural weapons. Text 23, translation. Hiranyakashipu murmured to himself, Lord Vishnu, who possesses great mystic power, has made this plan to kill me. But what is the use of such an attempt? Who can fight with me? Thinking like this, and taking up his club, Hiranyakashipu attacked the Lord like an elephant. Purport. In the jungle, there are sometimes fights between lions and elephants. Here the Lord appeared like a lion, and Hiranyakashipu, unafraid of the Lord, attacked him like an elephant. Generally, the elephant is defeated by the lion, and therefore the comparison in this verse is appropriate. Text 29, translation. Just as a small insect falls forcefully into a fire and the significant creature becomes invisible, when Hiranyakashipu attacked the Lord, who was full of effulgence, Hiranyakashipu became invisible. This is not at all astonishing, for the Lord is always situated in pure goodness. Formerly, during creation, he entered the dark universe and illuminated it by his spiritual effulgence. Purport. The Lord is situated transcendentally in pure goodness. The material world is generally controlled by tamoguna, the quality of ignorance, but the spiritual world because of the presence of the Lord and his effulgence. He is free from all contamination by darkness, passion, or contaminated goodness. Although there is a tinge of goodness in this material world, in terms of the Brahmanical qualifications, such qualifications sometimes become invisible because of the strong prevalence of the modes of passion and ignorance. But because the Lord is always transcendently situated, the material modes of passion and ignorance cannot touch him. Whenever the Lord is present, there cannot be any darkness from the mode of ignorance. It is stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela 22:31, Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Haya Andakara, Yahan Krishna Tahan Nahi, Mayara Adhikara. Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is no nescience. This material world is full of darkness and ignorance of spiritual life, but by Bhakti Yoga, this ignorance is dissipated. The Lord appeared because of the Bhakti Yoga exhibited by Prahlad Maharaj. And as soon as the Lord appeared, the influence of Hiranyakashipu's passion and ignorance was vanquished, as the Lord's quality of pure goodness, or the Brahman effulgence, became prominent. In that prominent effulgence, Hiranyakashipu became invisible, or his influence became insignificant. An example illustrating how the darkness of the material world is vanquished is given in the Shastra. When Brahma was created from the lotus stem, growing from the abdomen of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Lord Brahma saw everything to be dark, but when he received knowledge from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything became clear. As everything becomes clear, when one comes from night to sunshine, the important point is that as long as we are in the material modes of nature, we are always in darkness. This darkness cannot be dissipated without the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is invoked by the practice of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga creates a transcendental situation with no tinges of material contamination. Text 25, translation. Thereafter, the great demon Hiranyakashipu, who was extremely angry, swiftly attacked Nrsimhadeva with his club and began to beat him. Lord Nrsimhadeva, however, captured the great demon along with his club, just as Garuda might capture a great snake. Text 26, translation. O Yudhishthira, O great son of Bharata, when Lord Nrsimhadeva gave Hiranyakashipu a chance to slip from his hand, just as Garuda sometimes plays with a snake and lets it slip from his mouth, the demigods who had lost their abodes and who were hiding behind the clouds for fear of the demon did not consider that incident very good. Indeed, they were perturbed. Purport. When Hiranyakashipu was in the process of being killed by Lord Nrsimhadeva, the Lord gave the demon a chance to slip from his clutches. This incident was not very much appreciated by the demigods, for they were greatly afraid of Hiranyakashipu. They knew that if somehow or other Hiranyakashipu escaped from Nrsimhadeva's hands and saw that the demigods were looking forward to his death with great pleasure, he would take great revenge upon them. Therefore, they were very much afraid. Text 27, translation. When Hiranyakashipu was freed from the hands of Nrsimhadeva, he falsely thought that the Lord was afraid of his prowess. Therefore, after taking a little rest from the fight, he took up his sword and shield and again attacked the Lord with great force. Purport. When a sinful man enjoys material facilities, foolish people sometimes think, how is that this sinful man is enjoying, whereas a pious man is suffering? By the will of the Supreme, A sinful man is sometimes given the chance to enjoy the material world as if he were not under the clutches of material nature, just so that he may be fooled. A sinful man who acts against the laws of nature must be punished, but sometimes he is given a chance to play, exactly like Hiranyakashipu when he was released from the hands of Nrsimhadeva. Hiranyakashipu was destined to be ultimately killed by Nrsimhadeva, but just to see the fun, the Lord gave him a chance to slip from his hands. Text 28, translation. Making a loud, shrill sound of laughter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, who is extremely strong and powerful, captured Hiranyakashipu, who was protecting himself with his sword and shield, leaving no gaps open. With the speed of an arc, Hiranyakashipu moved, sometimes in the sky and sometimes on the earth, his eyes closed because of fear of Nrsimhadeva's laughter. Text 29, translation. As a snake captures a mouse, or Garuda captures a very venomous snake, Lord Nrsimhadeva captured Hiranyakashipu, who would not be pierced even by the thunderbolt of King Indra, as Hiranyakashipu moved his limbs here, there, and all around, very much afflicted at being captured. Lord Nrsimhadeva placed the demon on his lap, supporting him with his thighs, and in the doorway of the assembly hall, the Lord very easily tore the demon to pieces with the nails of his hand. Purport. Hiranyakashipu had received from Lord Brahma the benediction that he would not die on the land or in the sky. Therefore, to keep the promise of Lord Brahma intact, Nrsimhadeva placed Hiranyakashipu's body on his lap, which was neither land nor sky. Hiranyakashipu had received the benediction that he would not die either during the day or at night. Therefore, to keep this promise of Brahma, the Lord killed Hiranyakashipu in the evening, which is the end of the day and the beginning of the night. But it is neither day or night. Hiranyakashipu had taken a benediction from Lord Brahma that you would not die from any weapon or be killed by any person, dead or alive. Therefore, just to keep the word of Lord Brahma, Lord Nrsimhadeva pierced Hiranyakashipu's body with his nails, which were not weapons and were neither living nor dead. Indeed, the nails can be called dead, but at the same time, they can be said to be alive. To keep intact all of Lord Brahma's benedictions, Lord Nrsimhadeva paradoxically but very easily killed the great demon Hiranyakashipu. Text 30, translation. Lord Nrsimhadeva's mouth and mane were sprinkled with drops of blood, and his fierce eyes, full of anger, were impossible to look at. Licking the edge of his mouth with his tongue, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Nrsimhadeva, decorated with a garland of intestines taken from Hiranyakashipu's abdomen, resembled a lion that has just killed an elephant. Purport. The hair of Lord Nrsimhadeva's face, being sprinkled with drops of blood, was reddish and looked very beautiful. Lord Nrsimhadeva pierced Hiranyakashipu's abdomen with his nails, pulled out the demon's intestines, and wore them as a garland, which enhanced his beauty. Thus the Lord became very fearsome, like a lion engaged in fighting an elephant. Text 31, translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had many, many arms, first uprooted Hiranyakashipu's heart and then threw him aside and turned toward the demon's soldiers. These soldiers had come in thousands to fight with him with raised weapons and were very faithful followers of Hiranyakashipu. But Lord Nrsimhadeva killed all of them merely with the ends of his nails. Purport. Since the creation of the material world, there have been two kinds of men, the Devas and the Asuras. The Devas are always faithful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the Asuras are always atheists who defy the supremacy of the Lord. At the present moment, throughout the entire world, the atheists are extremely numerous. They are trying to prove that there is no God and that everything takes place due to combinations and permutations of material elements. Thus, the material world is becoming more and more godless, and consequently, everything is in a disturbed condition. If this continues, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will certainly take action, as he did in this case of Hiranyakashipu. Within a second, Hiranyakashipu and his followers were destroyed. And similarly, if this godless civilization continues, it will be destroyed in a second, simply by the movement of one finger of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demons should therefore be careful and curtail their godless civilization. They should take advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement and become faithful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, they are doomed. As Hiranyakashipu was killed in a second, the godless civilization can be destroyed at any moment. Text 32, translation. The air on Nrsimhadeva's head shook the clouds and scattered them here and there. His glaring eyes stole the effulgence of the luminaries in the sky, and his breathing agitated the seas and oceans. Because of his roaring, all the elephants in the world began to cry in fear. Purport. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 10.41, Yat Yat Vibhutimat Sattvam Srimat Urjitam Yevava Tat Tat Yeva Vagacha Tvam Mama Tejomsha Sambhavam. Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. The illuminations of the planets and stars in the sky is but a partial manifestation of the Lord's effulgence. There are many wonderful qualities of different living entities, but whatever extraordinary things exist are but part of the Lord's stages is illumination or brilliance. The deep waves of seas and oceans and the many other wonders within the creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead all become insignificant when the Lord, in his special future, incarnates within this material world. Everything is insignificant in comparison to his personal, all defeating transcendental qualities. Text 33, translation. Airplanes were thrown into outer space and upper planetary system by the air on Nrsimhadeva's head. Because of the pressure of the Lord's lotus feet, the earth appeared to slip from its position, and all the hills and mountains sprang up due to his intolerable force. Because of the Lord's bodily effulgence, both the sky and all directions diminished in their natural illumination. Purport that there were airplanes flying in the sky long, long ago can be understood from this verse. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago, and the statements of this verse prove that the symptoms of a very advanced civilization then existed, even in the upper planetary systems, as well as in the lower planetary systems. Modern scientists and philosophers foolishly explain that there was no civilization prior to 3,000 years ago. But the statement of this verse nullifies such whimsical judgments. The Vedic civilization existed millions and millions of years ago. It existed since the creation of this universe, and it included arrangements all over the universe with all the modern amenities and even more. Text 34, translation, manifesting a full effulgence and a fearsome countenance, Lord Nrsimha, being very angry and finding no contestant to face his power and opulence, then sat down in the assembly hall on the excellent throne of the king. Because of fear and obedience, no one could come forward to serve the Lord directly. Purport. When the Lord sat on the throne of Hiranyakashipu, there was no one to protest. No enemy came forward on behalf of Hiranyakashipu to fight with the Lord. This means that his supremacy was immediately accepted by the demons. Another point is that although Hiranyakashipu treated the Lord as his bitterest enemy, he was the Lord's faithful servant in Vaikuntha, and therefore the Lord had no hesitation in sitting on the throne that Hiranyakashipu had so laboriously created. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks in this connection that sometimes, with great care and attention, great saintly persons and rishis offer the Lord valuable seats decorated with Vedic mantras and tantras, but still the Lord does not sit upon those thrones. Hiranyakashipu, however, had formerly been Jaya, the doorkeeper at the Vaikuntha gate. And although he had fallen because of the curse of the Brahmanas, and had gotten the nature of a demon. And although he had never offered anything to the Lord as Hiranyakashipu, the Lord is so affectionate to his devotee and servant that he nonetheless took pleasure in sitting on the throne that Hiranyakashipu had created. In this regard, it is to be understood that a devotee is fortunate in any condition of his life. Text 35, translation. Hiranyakashipu had been exactly like a fever of meningitis in the head of the three worlds. Thus, when the wives of the demigods in the heavenly planets saw that the great demon had been killed by the personal hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their faces blossomed in great joy. The wives of the demigods again and again showered flowers from the heaven upon Lord Nrsimhadeva like rain. Text 36, translation. At that time, the airplanes of the demigods would decide to see the activities of the Supreme Lord Narayana crowded the sky. The demigods began beating drums and kettle drums, and upon hearing them, the angelic woman began to dance, while the chiefs of the Gandharvas sang sweetly. Text 37 to 39. Translation. My dear King Yudhishthira, the demigods then approached the Lord. They were headed by Lord Brahma, King Indra, and Lord Shiva, and included great saintly persons and the residents of Pitruloka, Siddhaloka, Vidyadhara Loka, and the planet of the snakes. The Manus approached, and so did the chiefs of various other planets. The angelic dancers approached, as did the Gandharvas and the Charanas, the Yakshas, the inhabitants of Kinnaraloka, the Vetalas, the inhabitants of Loka, and the personal servants of Vishnu, like Sunanda and Kumuda. All of them came near the Lord, who glowed with intense light. They individually offered their obeisances and prayers, their hands folded at their ears. Text 40, translation. Lord Brahma prayed, My Lord, you are unlimited, you possess unending potencies. No one can estimate or calculate your prowess and wonderful influence, for your actions are never polluted by the material energy. Through the material qualities, you very easily create the universe, maintain it, and again annihilate it. Yet, you remain the same without deterioration. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. The activities of the Lord are always wonderful. His personal servants, Jaya and Vijaya, were confidential friends, yet they were cursed, and they accepted bodies of demons. Again, in the family of one such demon, Prahlad Maharaj was caused to take birth to exhibit the behavior of an exalted devotee. To kill that same demon was who by the Lord's own will had taken birth in a demoniac family. Therefore, who can understand the Lord's transcendental activities? Not to speak of understanding the transcendental activities of the Lord, no one can understand even the activities of his servants. In Chaitanya Charitamrita 23.39, it is said, Tandra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vigneha na Bujihaya. No one can understand the activities of the Lord's servants. Therefore, what to speak of the activities of the Lord? Who can understand how Krishna is benefiting the entire world? The the Lord is addressed as Duranda Shakti. One can understand his potencies and how he acts. Tradition. The end that this insignificant demon, Hiranyakashipu, has been killed, O my Lord, who are naturally affectionate to your devotee. Kindly protect his son, Prahlad Maharaj, who is standing nearby as your fully surrendered devotee. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the creator of the material world. There are three processes in creation, namely creation, maintenance, and finally annihilation. During the period of annihilation, at the end of each millennium, the Lord becomes angry, and the part of anger is played by Lord Shiva and is therefore called Rudra. When the Lord appeared in great anger to kill Hiranyakashipu, everyone was extremely afraid of the Lord's attitude. But Lord Shiva, knowing very well that the Lord's anger is also his Leela, was not afraid. Lord Shiva knew that he would have to play the part of anger for the Lord. Kala means Lord Shiva, Bhairava, and Kopa refers to the Lord's anger. These words combined together as Kopa Kala refer to the end of each millennium. Actually, the Lord is always affectionate toward his devotees, even though he may appear very angry because he is Avyatma, because he never falls down, even when angry. The Lord is affectionate toward his devotees. Therefore, Lord Shiva reminded the Lord to act like an affectionate father to our Prahlad Maharaj, who was standing by the Lord's side as an exalted, fully surrendered devotee. Text 42, translation. King Indra said, O Supreme Lord, you are our deliverer and protector. Our shares of sacrifices, which are actually yours, have been recovered from the demon by you. Because the demoniac king Kashipu was most fearsome, our hearts, which are your permanent abode, were all overtaken by him. Now, by your presence, the gloom and darkness in our hearts have been dissipated. O Lord, for those who always engage in your service, which is more exalted than liberation, all material opulence is insignificant. They do not even care for liberation, not to speak of the benefits of Kama, Artha, and Dharma. Purport. In this material world, there are two kinds of people, the Devatas, demigods, and the Asuras, demons. Although the demigods are attached to material enjoyment, they are devotees of the Lord who act according to the rules and regulations of the Vedic injunctions. During the reign of Hiranyakashipu, everyone was disturbed in the routine duties of Vedic civilization. When Hiranyakashipu was killed, all the demigods who had always been disturbed by Hiranyakashipu felt relief in their general way of life. Because the government in Kali Yuga is full of demons, the living conditions of devotees are always disturbed. Devotees cannot perform yajna and thus they cannot partake of the remnants of food offered in yajna for the worship of Lord Vishnu. The hearts of demigods are always filled with fear of the demons, and therefore they cannot think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The engagement of the demigods is to think of the Lord always within the course of their hearts. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 6.47, Yoginam Abhisharvesham Madgata Madgaterandaratmana Shraddhavan Bhajate Yoma Shame Yuktatamo Mataha. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. The demigods fully absorb themselves in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead to become perfect yogis. But because of the presence of demons, their hearts are filled with the activities of the demons. Thus, their hearts, which are meant to be the abode of the Supreme Lord, are practically occupied by the demons. All the demigods felt relieved when Hiranyakashipu was dead, for they could easily think of the Lord. They could then receive the results of sacrifices and become happy, even though in the material world. Text 43, translation. All the saintly persons present offered their prayers in this way. O Lord, O supreme maintainer of those sheltered at your lotus feet, O original personality of Godhead, the process of austerity and penance in which you instructed us before is the spiritual power of your very self. It is by austerity that you create the material world which lies dormant within you. This austerity was almost stopped by the activities of this demon. But now, by yourself appearing in the form of Nrsimhadeva, which is meant just to give us protection, and by killing this demon, you have again approved the process of austerity. Purport. The living entities wandering within the jurisdiction of the 8,400,000 species of life get the opportunity for self-realization in the human form and gradually in such other elevated forms as those of the demigods, kinnaras, and charanas, as will be described below. In the higher statuses of life, beginning from human life, the main duty is tapasya or austerity. As Rishabhadev advised his sons, Tapo Divyam Putra Kayena Satvam Sudhye. To rectify our material existence, austerity, tapasya is absolutely necessary. However, when people in general come under the control of a demon or a demoniac ruling power, they forget this process of tapasya and gradually also become demoniac. All the saintly persons who were generally engaged in austerity felt relieved when Hiranyakashipu was killed by the Lord in the form of Nrsimhadeva. They realized that the original instruction concerning human life, that it is meant for tapasya, for self-realization, was reaffirmed by the Lord when he killed Hiranyakashipu. Text 44, translation. The inhabitants of Pitraloka pray, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Nrsimhadeva, the maintainer of the religious principles of the universe. He has killed Hiranyakashipu, the demon who by force enjoyed all the offerings of the Shraddha ceremonies performed by our sons and grandsons on the anniversaries of our death, and who drank the water with sesame seeds offered in holy places of pilgrimage. By killing this demon, O Lord, you have taken back all this fallen property from his abdomen by piercing it with your nails. We therefore wish to offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. It is the duty of all householders to offer food grains to all the dependent. But during the time of Hiranyakashipu, this process was stopped. No one would offer Shraddha oblations of food grains to the forefathers with great respect. Thus, when there is a demoniac group, everything concerning the Vedic principles is turned upside down. All the religious ceremonies of yajna are stopped. The resources meant to be spent for yajna are taken away by the demoniac government. Everything becomes chaotic, and consequently, the entire world becomes hell itself. When the demons are killed by the presence of Nrsimhadeva, everyone feels comfortable, irrespective of the planet upon which he lives. Text 45, translation. The inhabitants of Siddhaloka pray, O Lord Nrsimhadeva, because we belong to Siddhaloka, we automatically achieve perfection in all eight kinds of mystic power. Yet, Hiranyakashipu was so dishonest that by the strength of his power and austerity, he took away our powers. Thus, he became very proud of his mystic strength. Now, because this rogue has been killed by your nails, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. On earth, there are many yogis who can exhibit some feeble mystic power by manufacturing pieces of gold like magic. But the inhabitants of the planet Siddhaloka are actually extremely powerful in mysticism. They can fly from one planet to another without airplanes. This is called Lahima Siddhi. They can actually become very light and fly in the sky by a severe type of austerity. However, Hiranyakashipu excelled all the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and created disturbances for them. The residents of Siddhaloka were also beaten by the powers of Hiranyakashipu. Now that Hiranyakashipu had been killed by the Lord, the inhabitants of Siddhaloka also felt relieved. Text 46, translation. The inhabitants of Vidyadhara Loka prayed, our acquired power to appear and disappear in various ways according to varieties of meditation was banned by that foolish Hiranyakashipu because of his pride in his superior bodily strength and his ability to conquer others. Now, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has killed him just as if the demon were an animal. Unto that supreme pastime form of Nrsimhadeva, we eternally offer our respectful obeisances. Text 47, translation. The inhabitants of Nagaloka said, the most sinful Hiranyakashipu took away all the jewels on our boobs and all our beautiful wives. Now, since his chest has been pierced by your nails, you are the source of all pleasure to our wives. Thus, we together offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. No one is peaceful if his wealth and wife are forcibly taken away. All the inhabitants of Nagaloka, which is situated below the earthly planetary system, were in great anxiety because their wealth had been stolen and their wives kidnapped by Hiranyakashipu. Now Hiranyakashipu, having been killed, their wealth and wives were returned, and their wives felt satisfied. The inhabitants of various locals or planets offered their respectful obeisances unto the Lord because they were relieved by the death of Hiranyakashipu. Disturbances similar to those created by Hiranyakashipu are now taking place all over the world because of demoniac governments. As stated in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the men of the governments of Kali Yuga will be no better than rogues and plunderers. Thus, the populace will be harassed on one side by the scarcity of food and on another by heavy taxation by the government. In other words, the people in most parts of the world in this age are harassed by the ruling principles of Hiranyakashipu. Text 48, translation. All the Manus offered their prayers as follows. As your order carriers, O Lord, we, the Manus, are the lawgivers for human society. But because of the temporary supremacy of this great demon, Hiranyakashipu, our laws for maintaining Varnashrama Dharma were destroyed. O Lord, now that you have killed this great demon, we are in our normal condition. Kindly order us, your eternal servants, what to do now. Purport. In many places in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord Krishna refers to the Varnashrama Dharma of four Varnas and four Ashramas. He teaches people about this Varnashrama Dharma so that all of human society can live peacefully by observing the principles for the four social divisions and four spiritual divisions, Varna and Ashrama, and thus make advancement in spiritual knowledge. The Manus compiled the Manu Samhita. The word Samhita means Vedic knowledge, and Manu indicates that this knowledge is given by Manu. The Manus are sometimes incarnations of the Supreme Lord and sometimes empowered living entities. Formerly, many long years ago, Lord Krishna instructed the Sun God. The Manus are generally sons of the Sun God. Therefore, while speaking to Arjuna about the importance of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivashwan Manave Praha. This instruction was given to Vivashwan, the sun god, who in turn instructed his son Manu. Manu gave the law known as Manu Samhita, which is full of directions based on Varna and Ashrama, concerning how to live as human beings. These are very scientific ways of life, but under the rules of demons like Hiranyakashipu, human society breaks all these systems of law and order and gradually becomes lower and lower. Thus, there is no peace in the world. The conclusion is that if we want real peace and order in the human society, we must follow the principles laid down by the Manusamhita and confirmed by the Supreme Personality of God, Krishna. Text 49. Translation. The Prajapatis offered their prayers as follows. O Supreme Lord, Lord of even Brahma and Shiva, we, the Prajapatis, were created by you to execute your orders. But we were forbidden by Hiranyakashipu to create any more good cosmos. Now the demon is lying dead before us, his chest pierced by you. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto you, whose incarnation in this form of pure goodness is meant for the welfare of the entire universe. Text 50, translation. The inhabitants of Gandharva Loka pray, Your Lordship, we never engage in your service by dancing and singing in dramatic performances. But this Hiranyakashipu, the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka prayed, Your Lordship, we ever engage in your service by dancing and singing in dramatic performances. But this Hiranyakashipu, by the influence of his bodily strength and valor, brought us under his subjugation. Now he has been brought to this low condition by your Lordship. What benefit can result from the activities of such an upstart as Hiranyakashipu? Purport. By being a very obedient servant of the Supreme Lord, one becomes extremely powerful in bodily strength, influence, and effulgence. Whereas the fate of demoniac upstarts is ultimately to fall down like Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu and persons like him may be very powerful for some time, but the obedient servants of the Supreme Personality of God, like the demigods, remain powerful always. They are victorious over the influence of Hiranyakashipu by the grace of the Supreme Lord. Text 51, translation. The inhabitants of the Charanloka said, O Lord, because you have destroyed the demon Hiranyakashipu, who was always a stake in the hearts of all honest men, we are now relieved, and we eternally take shelter of your lotus feet, which award the conditioned soul liberation from materialistic contamination. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his transcendental form of Narhari, Nrsimhadeva, is always ready to kill the demons who always create disturbances in the minds of honest devotees. To spread the Krishna consciousness movement, devotees have to face many dangers and impediments all over the world. But the faithful servant who preaches with great devotion to the Lord must know that Lord Nrsimhadeva is always his protector. Text 52, translation. The inhabitants of Yakshaloka pray, O controller of the 24 elements, we are considered the best servants of your lordships because of rendering services pleasing to you. Yet we engaged as palanquin carriers by the order of Hiranyakashipu, the son of Diti. O Lord, in the form of Nrsimhadeva, you know how this demon gave trouble to everyone. But now you have killed him, and his body is mixing with the five material elements. Purport. The Supreme Lord is the controller of the 10 senses, the five material elements, the five sense objects, the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, and the soul. Therefore, he is addressed as Panchavimsha, the 25th element. The inhabitants of the Yaksha planet are supposed to be the best of all servants, but Hiranyakashipu engaged them as palanquin carriers. The entire universe was in trouble because of Hiranyakashipu. But now that Hiranyakashipu's body was mixing with the five material elements earth, water, fire, air, and sky, everyone felt relief. Upon Hiranyakashipu's death, the Yakshas were reinstated in their original service to the Supreme Personality of God. Thus, they felt obliged to the Lord and offered their prayers. Text 53, translation. The inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka said, we are insignificant living entities, and you are the supreme personality of Godhead, the supreme controller. Therefore, how can we offer suitable prayers unto you when this demon was condemned by devotees because they were disgusted with him? He was then killed by you. Purport. The cause of the Supreme Lord's appearance upon this earth is stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.7 and 8 by the Lord Himself. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata yuktanam adharmasya tathatmanam sajamyam paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya sadushkutam dharma samsthapanantaya shambhavami yuge yuge. Whenever and wherever there is a decrease in religious principles and a predominant rise in a religion, at that time I descend myself to deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. The Lord appears in order to execute two kinds of activities: to kill the demons and to protect the devotees. When the devotees are too disturbed by the demons, the Lord certainly appears in different incarnations to give the devotees protection. The devotees following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj should not be disturbed by the demoniac activities of the non-devotees. Rather, they should stick to their principles as sincere servants of the Lord and rest assured that the demoniac activities directed against them will not be able to stop their devotional service. Text 54, Translation. The inhabitants of Vaithalika Loka said, Dear Lord, because of chanting your spotless glories in great assemblies and arenas of sacrifice, we were accustomed to great respect from everyone. This demon, however, assert that position. Now, to our great fortune, you have killed this great demon exactly as one cures a chronic disease. Text 55, translation. The Kinnaras said, O Supreme Controller, we are ever existing servants of your lordships. But instead of rendering service to you, we were engaged by this demon in his service, constantly and without remuneration. This sinful man has now been killed by you. Therefore, O Lord Nrsimhadeva, O Master, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Please continue to be our patron. Text 56, translation. The associates of Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha offered this prayer, O Lord, our supreme giver of shelter. Today, we have seen your wonderful form as Lord Nrsimhadeva, meant for the good fortune of all the world. O Lord, we can understand that Hiranyakashipu was the same Jaya who engaged in your service but was cursed by Brahmanas and who thus received the body of a demon. We understand that his having now been killed is your special mercy upon him. Purport. Hiranyakashipu's coming to this earth and acting as the Lord's enemy was prearranged. Jaya and Vijaya were cursed by the Brahmanas, Sanaka, Sanat Kumara, Sanandana, and Sanatana. Because Jaya and Vijaya checked these four Kumaras, the Lord accepted this cursing of his servants and agreed that they would have to go to the material world and would then return to Vaikuntha after serving the term of the curse. Jaya and Vijaya were very much perturbed, but the Lord advised them to act as enemies, for then they would return after 3 births. Otherwise, ordinarily, they would have to take 7 births. With this authority, Jaya and Vijaya acted as the Lord's enemies, and now that these two were dead, all the Vishnu Dutas understood that the Lord's killing of Hiranyakashipu was special mercy bestowed upon them. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the 7th canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Nrsimhadeva slays the king of the demons. Chapter 9. Prahlad pacifies Lord Nrsimhadeva with prayers. As related in this chapter, Lord Maharaj, following the order of Lord Brahma, pacified the Lord when the Lord was extremely angry after having killed Hiranyakashipu. After Hiranyakashipu was killed, the Lord continued to be very angry, and the demigods, aided by Lord Brahma, could not pacify him. Even Mother Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the constant companion of Narayana, could not dare come before Lord Nrsimhadeva. Then Lord Brahma asked Prahlad Maharaj to go forward and pacify the Lord's anger. Prahlad Maharaj, being confident of the affection of his master, Lord Nrsimhadeva, was not afraid at all. He very gravely appeared before the Lord's lotus feet and offered him respectful obeisances. Lord Nrsimhadeva, being very much affectionate toward Prahlad Maharaj, put his hand on Prahlad's head, and because of being personally touched by the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj immediately achieved Brahmagyan, spiritual knowledge. Thus, he offered his prayers to the Lord in full spiritual knowledge and full devotional ecstasy. The instructions given by Prahlad Maharaj in the form of his prayers are as follows. Prahlad said, I am not proud of being able to offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I simply take shelter of the mercy of the Lord, for without devotion, one cannot appease him. One cannot please the Supreme Personality of God simply by dint of high parentage or great opulence, learning, austerity, penance, or mystic power. Indeed, these are never pleasing to the Supreme Lord, for nothing can please him but pure devotional service. Even if a non-devotee is a Brahmana qualified with the 12 Brahmanical symptoms, he cannot be very dear to the Lord. Whereas, if a person born in a family of dog eaters is a devotee, the Lord can accept his prayers. The Lord does not need anyone's prayers, but if a devotee offers his prayers to the Lord, the devotee benefits greatly. Ignorant persons born in low families, therefore, can sincerely offer heartfelt prayers to the Lord, and the Lord will accept them. As soon as one offers his prayers to the Lord, he is immediately situated on the Brahman platform. Lord Nrsimhadeva appeared for the benefit of all human society, not only for Prahlad's personal benefit. The fierce form of Lord Nrsimhadeva may appear most often to a non-devotee, but to the devotee, the Lord is always affectionate as he is in other forms. Conditional life in the material world is actually extremely fearful. Indeed, a devotee is not afraid of anything else. Fear of material existence is due to false ego. Therefore, the ultimate goal of life for every living entity is to attain the position of being servant of the Lord. The miserable condition of the living entities in the material world can be remedied only by the mercy of the Lord. Although there are so-called material protectors like Lord Brahma and other demigods, or even one's own father, they are unable to do anything if one is neglected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one who has fully taken shelter of the Lord's lotus feet can be saved from the onslaught of material nature. Therefore, every living entity should be unattracted by material so-called happiness and should take shelter of Lord by all means. That is the mission of human life. To be attracted by sense gratification is simply foolish. Whether one is a devotee of the Lord or is a non-devotee does not depend upon one's birth in the high or low family. Even Lord Brahma and the goddess of fortune cannot achieve the full favor of the Lord, whereas a devotee can very easily attain such devotional service. The Lord's mercy is bestowed equally upon everyone, regardless of whether one is high or low. Because Prahlad Maharaj was blessed by Narada Muni, Prahlada became a great devotee. The Lord always saves the devotee from impersonalist and voidist. The Lord is present in everyone's heart as the super soul to give the living being protection and all benefits. Does the Lord act sometimes as the killer and sometimes as the protector? One should not accuse the Lord for any discrepancies. It is His plan that we see varieties of life within this material world. All of them are ultimately His mercy. So, Nrsimhadeva Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Shri Krishna Kishore ki jai, Shri Prabhupada.